And then Hagmann report for today. It is Friday, June 6, 2014. We have an anniversary of sorts. Not of sorts, an anniversary. This is the 70th anniversary of D-Day, World War II. Everyone should take a moment today to remember America's bravest and finest. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host with my son Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of incredible programming, unbiased, uncensored news, information, analysis, things that you need to know in these perilous times in which we live. I keep thinking back to a statement Steve Quill made that, in the end of the days, all things hidden will be made known. And tonight we're going to be getting into some very, very heavy issues with Mr. Dave Hodges and also Sheila Zielinski. Sheila Zielinski from the Weekend Vigilante and Dave Hodges from the Common Sense Show. But folks, you're listening to the only show where we present the news to you in 3D. We look beyond the headlines and bylines, bring you the news behind the news. I want to remind everyone tonight that portions of tonight's broadcast is sponsored by NatureBox. Order great tasting, healthy snacks right to your door. Forget about the vending machine, the snack aisles in the grocery stores and the convenience stores. Get in shape for summer with healthy, delicious treats. Support our show and get 50% off your first order just by going to naturebox.com/CFB radio. Or if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the link that says NatureBox. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Thanks to the new listeners as well. Hello to the new listeners. Again, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on the internet. Our home base is HomelandSecurityUS.com. We're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. Tune us in there at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. I just want to end the week by saying that this was a short week for us program-wise, but a very long week for us otherwise, I think. I mean, it just felt like we really traveled cross country. Oh, maybe we did. That said, Joe, welcome to the studio.
Glad to be here. We have a fantastic show tonight. We have had last night Henry Groover and Steve Quill. For those who missed it, I would suggest anybody who didn't get to hear it, download the archive and listen to that show. It was really 3 hours of Henry Groover giving powerful testimony on his experiences in the past pertaining to what we're seeing today. And it was very relevant, and it's been a while since we had Mr. Groover on, and it was surely a blessing. Next Monday, we're going to have a guest on, never been on our show before, and it's our fault, I say, for that not happening. Should have been on a long time ago. Coach Dave. He was a speaker at the conference we were at with Greg Evenson. He spoke in between in Greg Evenson's speeches. And you talk about a guy who's on fire for the Lord and shows it in enthusiasm.
Past Assault Ministries is his website. I talked to him this morning, Joe. This guy, just a typical, imagine the typical football coach, high school, college, even pro football coach, and this is Coach David Dobmeyer, Past Assault Ministries. And I got to tell you, man, he does not need a microphone when he talks. This guy absolutely blew the roof off of the venue. But I'll say this, and I mean this. If you're faint of heart, if you are sissies, I don't mean that. If you get if you don't like strong talk, then you might not want to listen to Monday because Coach Dave has been through the mill. He was arrested for taking Terry Schiavo water, or attempting to take Terry Schiavo water, to give her nourishment or give her water so she didn't die of thirst. Remember Terry Schiavo? he's going to speak straight to the Christians and ask why we are not getting off of our backsides and doing what we're supposed to be doing. Oh, man. I talked to him at 8:30 this morning, and it was like I got a shot of vitamin B12, man.
I can imagine. I mean, he really knows how to get people fired up. And being a high school football coach, that's his job. Was his job. And I think, if I remember correctly, I'm not sure if he was fired or if he quit, but he would lead his team and the opposing team in prayer, his team in prayer before the football games, and anybody who would come to the center of the football field to pray after the football games. And they would not allow him, this school in Ohio that he was coaching. And so he said, I'm going to go spread the good news of the Lord in my way. And he's been very successful at doing that. And it's one thing that on his website, what is it? PTS.com, I believe.
It's the abbreviation for Pass the Salt Ministries. I've got to double check.
I got it right here.
Okay. But you've got to check out his commentaries and what have you.
PTSalt.com is the website. PTSalt.com. On the title, on the homepage, there are different menus at the top. You go to commentaries. You can listen to many audio, pretty short audio commentaries from the coach and get an idea of his passion and what he believes in and stands up for. And they're fascinating commentaries. I'm happy that we got to meet him because I was not familiar with him personally before that. I've heard of the Pass the Salt Ministries, but never had a chance to listen to it. And I've been listening to the commentary since we got back, and they're fantastic. So with that, we're going to get into some news. We do have Sheila Zielinski coming on at the 8:30 here in a few short minutes to talk about her million-man fast that she has put together from June 8th to the 11th. And this is a very important fast. She is uniting Christians across the world, anybody who will listen and wants to participate in a fast, in prayer, fasting and praying. And she'll explain more as to why and what she hopes to get out of it. But the more people that join in on this fast, and I've been researching and learning about fast in different ways. We're supposed to fast when the Lord calls us to do something, when we are engaging in spiritual warfare, and many other reasons. And there's many different ways you can fast. Fasting doesn't mean you don't have to not eat or drink anything. There are different ways you can go about doing this, depending on your circumstances. Some people, are diabetic; they have to have food, and but there are ways, and maybe she'll talk a little bit about that too when she comes on. But definitely something very important that we're going to be hearing, followed by.
Well, she not followed by. This is something I didn't get a chance to tell you. Yeah, and with partially anyway. Dave Hodges. Now, Dave Hodges has been, folks. When we were out of town, we were getting messages that his website was offline, and my goodness, a lot of things were taking place. Well, Mr. Hodges has come across some. I want to be very careful here. I'm going to let him explain it because I don't want to get into territory that could very well be litigated, but or be the subject of additional investigation that exceeds what he wants to discuss. But if you go to his website, you can which is thecommonsenseshow.com, linked off of HomelandSecurityUS.com. All you have to do is go over to HomelandSecurityUS.com and click on either at the bottom of the article, which we have, kind of explaining what's going on, the promo for tonight. His website's linked off there. Go through some of the articles, in particular the child trafficking, sex trafficking. It hasn't gone away with the Franklin cover-up. Well, Sheila Zielinski interviewed him last night, so she's going to stay on with us for a little bit while he talks about what his findings were. And I've talked to him about his findings as well, and we've compared notes. And long story short, I've got to tell you, he is in some very serious, very deep, up to his neck deep findings.
When you get your
child sex
finger on the pulse on an issue like that, and you are exposing different agencies and organizations and powers that are engaged in the child sex trafficking ring, whether it be government agencies to satanic groups to whatever the people are who engage in this. I mean, you're hitting them in their sore spot. They will do anything to try to marginalize, to destroy the message that is of the truth getting out. It is so prevalent in our society today, and yet it is so rarely talked about. And my dad and I were talking yesterday, about picking up and joining Dave in his efforts in doing shows ourselves on this, because it is such a horrible topic to cover. Yet at the same time, it has to be discussed, because what is happening is truly sickening and evil to the core, and the people behind it are evil to the core. Yet it continues and it grows, and there are organizations and people inside our government, whether they I'm not saying it's the government, I'm saying people in the government are using their positions of power to help provide the children for these sick people who would purchase or sell them. And it has gotten way out of hand. I know in the UK it is way over the line as far as the amount of evidence, the amount of cases. And I remember receiving many emails from different people, about what was happening in Europe, saying you have to research this, you have to do a show on this, specifically about the European CPS. But it's a touchy subject. It's a hard subject to talk about.
Very true, Joe. Very, very true. I'm going to stick an image in the here shortly or a link to an image in the chat room. I just realized that I was on the wrong computer when I was. It's kind of a lengthy lengthy address, but I'm going to do that. It's a picture of Steve Quayle, Pastor Langford, Sheila Zielinski, myself, and Joe. I don't know where you were. You were at the other end, I think. I don't know what happened, but I'm going to try to find one with you as well. But it gives you an idea of Sheila Zielinski in terms of, some people say, well, what does she look like? I got a couple of emails, and it also shows Steve Quayle at the conference and what have you. But sorry about that. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent. But Steve, Joe, you've got some news here. I think we've got to hit a few things before Sheila comes on the air that are of extreme importance that people are not paying attention to, both in the economic sector, in the financial sector, as well as the world news here. Why don't you go ahead and lead off with your top story here?
Yeah, let's get into the economic news. We have two important economic news items that are separate from each other. And I guess we'll start with the one from Russia. A giant sucking sound is Russian money being yanked from United States banks. U.S. banks enjoyed more or less steady climbing, or rather soaring, deposits by Russian institutions and individuals, having tripled in just 2 years to $21.6 billion by February. This according to the U.S. Treasury. It says in the article that this seems a bit counterintuitive, that anyone would want to put their money in U.S. banks, especially for the Russians, who have other opportunities with their money, and why would they voluntarily subject themselves to the Fed's financial repression? Well, it goes on to talk about the how their diversity and options that Russia has. Why would they put their money in a zero-interest money system? But what they have done is it's like an economic war tool. They are using their money, and it's interesting how what we did to them as the Soviet Union is coming back to bite us in the butt. And what they have been doing is 61% of the deposits in just the last month have been withdrawn. That 21.6 billion that was deposited into U.S. banks by Russians is now down to 8.4 billion, and they are pulling their money out fast from the United States banks. And I don't know.
Sorry about that. I was trying to grab for the. I'm slow on the uptake tonight. I think we both are actually. We're both dragging from this week.
This is one of those days where you just feel real tired, and like you said, everything's dragging. And
oh yeah. Well, I'll just say this with respect to the economic situation of the banks. Right now, you're looking at potential negative interest rates or people being charged for deposits overseas. It's coming to this country as well.
That's our next story.
Okay.
U.S. banks preparing to change or charge customers for deposits. Negative interest rates coming to the USA. This article is from Infowars.com. But it goes on to say that in the week that the European Central Bank cut its deposit rate for banks from 0 to negative 0.1%, economist Martin Armstrong warns that negative interest rates are coming to the United States, meaning that Americans will be forced to pay just to keep their money in the bank.
Yeah. I cannot see any good reason for this. Now, a couple of things that we learned, and I'm glad we have this opportunity to talk. A couple of things that we learned in talking with some sources. But I can't say more than that, except to say that watch for the flight of the families that run the world, so to speak. Watch them begin to dump paper and go into precious metals, in particular silver. Okay.
Something we didn't really get into a few weeks back, or when it was reported, it was made very public, a story about George Soros dumping all of his stocks in J.P. Morgan, Citibank or Citigroup, and another high-end financial institution. And a lot of people said, when they look at that, they see it's a sign as what might be coming. In 2008, George Soros said, I'm having a great crisis. So people really follow his lead or pay attention to what he's doing in the economic world. And he had dumped all of his holdings and stocks in banking companies, which could be an indicator. And in today's news, it could be put out there. It could have been an action just to trigger some kind of false response or to trigger a response based on his action. It's mind-boggling to think that one man's influence can control the direction of an economy, but we know he has crashed several.
Well, he's also, and one thing I was told from at least one source is the fact that Soros is more of the visible canary in the coal mine. Soros is not even the guy that he's not the guy that makes the decisions anyway. He's the guy that does profit, but he's a foot soldier as well. So despite the fact that it would appear that Soros has got some weight and some direction or is able to direct the markets, where this is coming from are by orders of magnitude higher in the food chain. We're talking about the Illuminati bloodline families that are actually directing what is going to be taking place with the economy. And earlier this week, when we were live, I believe I mentioned that it was my feeling that based on the assessment of the evidence and information that we had collected, that we've probably got things are going to be happening starting on the 15th of July. Now, I'm not date setting. I'm just saying sometime mid-July. Okay, I think we're going to be able to see things begin to happen around mid-July. When I say things begin to happen, you're going to be looking at some of the more solid people who are in paper, or more people in paper, fleeing to the precious metals. Now, right, but see, have you noticed how the precious metals have been beaten down in terms of beaten beaten down in price, talked down in acceptability to hold. Well, this is so the people, the royalty, if you will, those with the ill intent can take physical delivery of both silver and gold. Now, of course, you have platinum, palladium, and other metals, but for now, let's just talk about silver and gold. The silver and gold right now are low. If you can get your hands on them, buy them. Don't buy them for an investment. If you have the means to do so, and this is only if you've got the means to do so. This is after you've got your food and water and everything. But if you have the extra cash, the extra fiat money, I would definitely be looking at buying silver and gold, in particular silver. Now, I am not an economic guy, and by no means am I a metals guy in terms of, I don't know what I am, but I'm an investigator. Okay, and I that's it. So, based on my investigation, I can see where there appears to be a plan where they are manipulating the prices of silver down to where they are today. And they might even go, 50 cents a dollar lower, although on the street, unless you're buying in quite the volume, you're not going to be able to get silver for much under, $22 maybe per ounce. This, a few dollars over spot price. I'm sure there are probably some sales. You look around, but you also have to be careful as well. With we know, Joe, that we've been hearing that the Chinese have been counterfeiting silver in putting silver into the market, into the consumer market. And the idea behind that is to erode the trust. Like everything else, business works on trust. And at the end of the day, the United States, when the dominoes start to fall, and they will, the economic dominoes, the United States is going to be made to look like the bad guy. And in a large part, they are. And it does not do my heart good to accuse my own country of being the bad guy. That's like when you're a parent, and if you're a parent of a teenage boy, who does that sound like? And your teenage boys running around with 3 or 4 other boys, and they get into trouble. Okay,
never happened to me.
No, of course not. Of course not. But you know how you feel. You know how that makes you feel. And sure, there's blame to be spread, but it really hits your house very hard, doesn't it? Don't you feel, it might have been Timmy's idea, but your son was involved, and it just makes, but see, that's the United States right now. Or that's how I feel about the United States right now. Yeah, it doesn't do me any good to know that there are others involved when the United States is, in fact, a big part of this. But what is going to happen is the United States will be the pariah, the financial pariah of the world. And it will be taken down. Now, next week, we're going to have, a couple of different shows. Joe, as you mentioned, on Monday, we're going to have Dave Dobbenmeyer from Pastor Salt Ministries. On Tuesday, Stan Dale. I think perhaps Wednesday, Pastor John Kyle, or hopefully we can get him on. We have to give him a call back. We have to have Greg Morris back on as well to talk about mortgages. But some of these, and in fact, we might even go to, and Joe and I never mentioned a word. I did not mention a word to this about with Joe, but we might even go to a 6th day of programming, because things are happening so quickly right now. We need to get the information out there. In particular, the economic information, because by this time next year, everyone's going to realize that something is wrong, and we're not going to be able to stop this train wreck from happening. by Christmas time of next year, it's going to be an entirely different world, I think, in my view. That's my time frame in my mind. I could be wrong by months.
Well,
I could be wrong by a year. I don't know.
Look at how fast things are changing now. Even, you have domestically all these different things going on. You have the scandals that are rampant throughout Washington that are continuing, the political corruption, the veil is being lifted from the lies that the establishment media has been promoting for decades, and a lot of people are coming to the realization that, as you just said, that the government, the country that they grew up to love and respect because of what it stood for, really is saying they're standing for one thing while doing the opposite on all fronts on the other side, while using propaganda to try to show that they're not working against the American people.
Okay. I just was looking at it was something I don't do, and of course it just you know how I can only do one thing at a time. But Debbie and Indy saying, or no, I'm sorry, Liberty Noel saying that V&W is talking about the things will start to happen in the middle of July. Thank you for that information. I did not know that. They were on Caravan to Midnight. I heard somewhere where they were on Caravan to Midnight. I've got to listen to that episode. Thank you for that. I don't know which episode, by the way. And I want to stress something else here because I saw something whip by in the chat room. Look, folks, you please take care of your water and your food needs first before you even think about purchasing precious metals. If you don't have precious metals, don't worry about it. And get the food and get the water first, or have the ability to get clean water for drinking purposes, and food, of course, for eating purposes. What else did you do with food?
Yeah, and
sorry about that. Was that a brilliant statement or what?
No, that was all right. An audio clip here I uploaded. It's just a minute. It talks about the latest job numbers. And listen to this. This is the headline of this clip. U.S. recovers all 8.7 million jobs lost during the recession. Here's the quick 1-minute clip.
U.S. employers maintained a solid pace of hiring in May, confirming that the country's economy has snapped back from the downturn caused by bad winter weather. Payrolls increased by 217,000, though the March and April numbers were revised down to show 6,000 fewer jobs created than previously reported. Still, the Labour Department said 5 years on, employment has returned to the same level as before the recession, recovering the more than 8.5 million jobs lost during that slump. But to put it in context, the US population has grown by nearly 7% since then. That important milestone in the economy's recovery came as May was the fourth straight month with job gains above 200,000.
All right, that's what's being reported. But here we have a few headlines. 37.2% not in labor force. This is a 36-year high. The percentage of American civilians 16 or older who do not have a job and are not actively seeking one remained at a 36-year high in May. Also, it goes on, there's a separate article, 7 million have left workforce since Obama took office. And Senator Jeff Sessions made a comment that it is an alarming rate that people are not losing their jobs, but failing or not re-entering their search for a job, or basically giving up on the workforce, as they say, on employment. So we see huge disparities. They can manipulate these numbers. We know that they count these unemployment counting, not factoring in inflation or I'm sorry, that's not the unemployment.
Look, they play with the numbers. Bottom line is they play with the numbers. I was talking to my plumber today. we had a situation with how tree roots grow and stuff. Anyway, I was talking with my plumber, and he said, you know what? I've never been busier with new housing, the installation of new pipes and new housings in this area. And I said, really, that's really interesting. And I thought back to what both the Financial Insider V and, of course, W had said was, it will appear toward the very end that things are going on an upward trajectory, that things are going very well. You're going to have kind of a mini boom in housing starts.
Yeah, stock market's at all-time high.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It's just great all the way around, right? I mean,
well, and that's how we could tell we are getting toward the end. This, according to both our intelligence and financial sources in V&W. And again, we joke around too. We'd like to fill the rest of the alphabet with sources, but really, have they been wrong? They haven't been wrong. Neither one of them have been wrong. I don't think they have at all. They've been pretty much on target. The timing we don't know, but it seems like there are indications. And thank you for pointing out the episode. We really appreciate that. So for Caravan to Midnight for V&W, but so it seems like we are getting close to the end at this point. And for those in the chat room, I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to post, and this is only for those in the chat room.
Yeah,
I'm going to post a photograph of Sheila Zielinski. You'll be able to pick her out of the crowd. Pastor David Langford to her left or your right in the picture. On right below, right beneath Sheila Zielinski would be me. Sorry, you can put a blue dot or something over that, and then Steve Quayle. And we'll throw on a
nice picture.
We'll put your picture up with Pastor Langford, your and I and Pastor Langford's picture up there as well. These pictures we're giving to you folks in the chat room first as a thank you, and then after that we'll publish them. But I just thought it was kind of neat.
Well, with that, we have our guest, Sheila Zielinski. Sheila, it's great to have you on the show. And it was fantastic meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you guys. Wow, so nice to put a face to the name.
Absolutely.
Sheila, you're going to have to breathe some life into this program this evening. We both feel like we've been, beat up and put in a blender here this week, but. I just got to tell you, it was so great to meet with you. I put up the picture you sent back. I put up in our chat room for people to take a look at, and I'll publish it later. But Sheila, you're just folks. This is Sheila Zielinski on the line. She is going to join us here for a while to talk about a couple of issues. One being her initiative, and I think this is such a great idea. It's a Million Man Fast. But Sheila is the host of the Weekend Vigilante show. Sheila, you've undergone some changes with your show. Why don't you go ahead and for those who haven't heard you before on our program, give us a little bit of an introduction, and then my next question is going to be about the conference. But
the conference! Wow.
Yes.
The conference. Well, I'm sort of hailed as well, people used to say Steve Quayle in a skirt. Yes, you can get that image out of your mind. Or Alex Jones in a dress. Used to be the kind of cutting edge little things being thrown out. But I really looked at, the draconian police state, totalitarianism. I was considered last year the fastest growing show in the alternative media, or the new media, as I like to call it. And, really drilling down into the truth and really looking at the extirpation of our constitutional freedoms, liberties, our sovereignty, and really uncovering this draconian police state and getting into the, events that are orchestrated, like the unseen hand of evil, maybe is a better word, of what's orchestrating world events. So, of course, we have a lot of the very similar pool of media consultants that we bring on, the Steve Quayles, the Doug Perez, the Tom Horns, the Chris Putnams, really an amazing lineup. So we really kind of have a very similar format. And one of the things I like to do in my show is I really like to get into, the connection to the New World Order and the Illuminati, these kingpins that are at the helm. And I think that's an important piece because, a lot of people, they want to talk about the political corruption and the left versus right. But it's not about left versus right. It's really about tyranny versus liberty, isn't it?
It is, Sheila. And to sit at the conference with you, and folks, I've got to tell you, I had the honor. Well, I can't say it any better than that. I had the honor to sit with you outside of the conference sessions, to listen to you, to talk with you, to get into your mind a little bit. And you've got such a great mind. You've got such a great handle on things. And I just want to say thanks for all you do, folks. This is one sharp lady, and you do not want to match wits with her unarmed. And 99% of anyone talking with you, Sheila, will be unarmed. I can guarantee it, because you've got your facts right set up. Now you've got. Are you free to talk about, Sheila, just very quickly, your your show? Tell us about your show, how we can listen, and because you made some changes.
Yeah, so the last time I talked to your audience, I was telling your audience that I had left my network, and the reason being, it's, there's a lot of reasons, but essentially I wasn't comfortable with being sandwiched in between a format that I'm not comfortable with, and I don't need to really get into much of that. But in other words, I was not happy with my network, and so I was approached by an owner of a network to, he laid out some details, and I mulled it over, and I did some praying about it, and I decided that I would join up with TFRN, which is Truth Frequency Radio Network. They broadcast on quite a few Sirius XM channels. I know 104, and I'm not sure the West and East Coast ones. A lot of FM and AM affiliates across the United States. They're worldwide audience, and their numbers are better than GCN, Alex Jones, etc. So I'm really happy to be with these guys, and weekendvigilante.com is my site, and they can go there to listen live. My first show is actually tonight at 9 o'clock Pacific. So I do a Wednesday and Friday show, 9 to 11 Pacific time, which is, I guess, East Coast time. That's 12 to 2 a.m., a little late for some people. But yeah, I have W, of course, James Bond in real life, spy extraordinaire tonight. So I've got a pretty hard-hitting lineup with him and Marinka Peshman, the author of Whistleblower, real highly acclaimed author and investigative journalist. So that'll be quite a pairing. And my first show debuts tonight.
Well, you just tell W that I'm gonna be tuned in, listening to him, and you better give me a hat tip, just for the heck of it. No, I'm kidding about that. But no, fantastic, folks. We are in support of the Weekend Vigilante. I going into battle as we are, Joe and I, and we are standing side by side with you in this fight against this new world tyrannical order that we have. And something, one thing about this conference, and I'm going to turn this back over to you, one thing about this conference that I took away from is there will be a remnant. There are remnants, actually, a remnant or remnants, I don't know how you'd classify it, forming right now to survive through onto the other side of what is about to hit us. And I left that conference with a feeling of hope, of good spirit, of knowing things will be bad, but also knowing that people will, there will be pockets of people, of leaders, of people that will make it to the other side because of their knowledge. But I'm just going to open this, or ask this open-ended question. What did you think of the conference? Just fire away.
Oh, well, the conference was so powerful, and I know that really sounds cliche, but, each of the speakers had a very powerful, inspirational, anointed message, and, you couldn't have scripted it better, really, and not a lot of them, I was, when I was talking to Michael Bennett just before the conference, a lot of the speakers, they had general talking points, but none of it was scripted. They didn't really know what they were going to speak about. They had some maybe general talking points, but you cannot script the Holy Spirit, what he wants to do. And I really felt like, it was just a real powerful, anointed time. I mean, we really saw the Holy Spirit's hand in so many things. And what I loved is we were able to place faces to speakers. And, because a lot of the speakers, they'd never even met each other face to face. And it was like one big family reunion, amazing family reunion to me. And that's what I loved. I mean, and John Kyle, Russ Tisdor was powerful. Steve Quayle, of course, was incredible. Coach, what can you say about him? Every one of them, Greg Evenson, and then David Langford when he got up and spoke, incredible, like with their Saturday night roundtable. That was amazing. And every single person that emailed me, and I've got hundreds of emails just saying, wow. And then, of course, the people that couldn't attend, of course, it's so exciting that we're going to have those DVDs of the whole entire thing. That's incredible. And, I got to say this really bothered me because, people will pay $4,000 to go see Deepak Chopra or get a Wayne Dyer conference video on some new agey shenanigan, and yet people were complaining that, the DVD might cost $120. And it's very, very expensive to put something like this together. And, people just have no idea of the time that we put into this kind of thing. And I just thought that was a little bit of a slap in the face that people were kind of complaining that, the DVDs were going to be charged for them. And I thought, wow, if people just had any clue, So anyway, I won't say anything else about that. But I thought that was really...
Well, let me just chime in here about the price of the DVDs, only because I've got so many DVDs from conferences in my office that I have watched, and they're good. But this is going to be quite a bit different. But one thing that what Michael Bennett did and what Steve did was they brought in full spectrum survival, and the way they are presenting this is not in any way, shape, or form presented in any other it's never been presented in this fashion that's going to be presented. Plus,
and you guys know Full Spectrum Survival. They did News in 2 Minutes, which we probably will be picking back up. I saw that he did actually try to contact us today, so I got to get in touch with him. But anyway,
and you know what, Sheila, I'm not exactly 100% sure, but I was told by there was a young lady carrying this huge, I don't know what it was some piece of equipment out that had something to do with the recording of this event, and I was helping her and holding the door and stuff, and through conversation, I believe there was close to $1 million worth of sound recording and visual recording equipment there that was either leased.
Yeah, absolutely, there was. I was talking to the other Michael. Yeah.
Okay, so so right there, you're looking at one heck of an exposure for this thing. So anyway, we don't have to get into that, but I just wanted to chime in because what are you going to do? It is what it is, and it's not a problem.
Well, how much was it a night to stay at the old Bilderberg Confab in Copenhagen? I wonder at that hotel. It's just amazing. We're on a shoestring, and yet we've got these nefarious globalists off. What did they say the Copenhagen hotel was? Something outlandish like $72,000 a night for these rooms. And anyway,
really?
It was really profound that we, I thought it was so fascinating that our conference paralleled, the Copenhagen Confab. I just thought that was really interesting. And then, as I think it was Michael Bennett that alluded to, the first night, of course, we had the SWAT team, the Draconian Police State Uprising 101 at the same time. I'm sure that was just a coincidence, though.
Did you happen to see that, by the way?
Yes, I did see. I saw actually about a dozen SWAT team members when I went over to pick up somebody at the airport, and I was with the rental car, and I was stunned. They were all over the place, and at first I thought maybe they were making some kind of movie, and it looked like it was on a movie set. And then I realized, wow, what are these guys all doing in town? And of course I kind of connected some dots. I found that very interesting timing, though, in Montana, in Bozeman of all things too. Because that's the thriving metropolis of Draconian Police State, right?
Yeah, it's not like Chicago where it's not like a hub of transportation. Yeah, it was quite. And we got in the what was it, late Thursday or late?
We left Wednesday, got in like
early
Thursday morning about 1 a.m. and it was very long.
But there were DHS vehicles and police cars and sheriff's vehicles everywhere around our hotel.
In our hotel, what was there? I think Steve counted 36.
Yeah, I thought they were making a new screening of like, Convoy 2014 or something. It was just absolutely mind-numbing to see. It was just it looked like a movie set. I mean, you couldn't script this. So I thought it was just interesting.
I do have to say this, and I didn't say this before on the show before when as we were checking into the hotel, and this is probably around 2:00 in the morning. There was that Conoco station, it's kind of a convenience store next to our hotel, and we had to we drove over to get a couple of Pepsis or whatever, and bring them back to the hotel and some snacks because we had eaten all day, and the there was this one, I don't know, it looked like a Yukon or a Yukon type vehicle, and there were two guys sitting in this vehicle in front of the Holiday Inn where the seminar was being held. Now, what were they doing sitting there roughly 2:00 in the morning in the front seat, facing the Holiday Inn, facing the front doors, watching the arrival of people? To me, that just didn't sit right, but we didn't go up and knock on the window and ask him. But anyway,
as Steve Quayle says, there's no coincidences, and I tend to believe that too. But I mean, the point that is good in all this is, regardless of what was happening, we saw the power of the Holy Spirit move profoundly. We saw I was involved in deliverance ministry with John Kyle on Saturday, so there were some breakout rooms, and him and I and Russ Diz started praying and deliverance and healing, and that was incredible just to see people released, and it was incredible. I mean, you can't say enough about the outpouring of the Holy Spirit and what we saw with when somebody just gets free. That in itself, just one person, if one person can become free from demonization or plagued with a lifetime, a malady of things, I mean, that itself is just so worth it. And I thought it was just absolutely profound. It was life-changing. People walked away. Again, the hundreds and probably almost thousands of emails I've got this week, people said, wow, they just said, what a life-changing experience. And, that place was packed out. It was just incredible how things flowed. Again, I can't say enough about John Kyle. His 45-minute interview that I caught in the lobby before they were doing mine, I mean, you just got goosebumps. You could just feel the anointing. I mean, that's a powerful man, and I really encourage people, to go to his website, the Oasis Network, and grab his book, Do You Have Demon Troubles? A Spiritual Guide to Winning. And it is, or Spiritual Warrior's Guide to Winning, I think is the subtitle. I actually read it on the plane back because I had about 7 transfers. I had I had a real problem getting down there. I had lots of things happening. I had a TSA grope and grab session where they hauled me off and pretty much gave me the whole molestation 101, which is pretty sick. But I thought, well, get a good cop a good feel, you perverts. I mean, that's just sick how they justify that in these airports. And then they banned my contact lens solution because that's in my arsenal of things to. I just thought it was just ridiculous. It was a little 4 milliliter bottle of contact solution. Oh, we can't be bringing that on the plane, but yet the guy behind me looked like Obama. It looked like Obama's twin brother, and then there was a guy behind him that looked like Osama bin Laden. I thought, well, you don't even bat him and I, but you're going to stop me and harass me. I just thought it was kind of interesting. So.
Sheila, I got to say this. I got an email from someone, and this gentleman is not wrong. I said I would never fly. I want to bankrupt excuse my language, but I want to bankrupt. I'm not going to say. I'm going to bankrupt these people, and I'm going to take the TSA out in terms of.
My dad got an email, and we said on the show, we'll never fly. And over the course of doing the show, we've had to travel a few different places. Orlando this year, we drove down.
We drove, yeah.
And then the Montana thing came up, and.
We thought about driving
to fly. We talked about it for a few weeks, and it was a 42-hour drive versus a day flight. And we know in our airport here, they don't have the body scanners. They don't have the huge TSA presence. They have a metal detector. And
that's
Bozeman
how we flew out.
Yeah, Bozeman being a very small airport, I thought it would be relatively the same, but no.
And the TSA here, Sheila, believe it or not, are more of a figurehead. The airport police are more active here. It's a long story.
And you got my dad got an email saying it was kind of harsh, calling you. What did they say? You were a liar, or you were?
Well, I've got no credibility left because I flew. Okay.
Yeah.
But you know what? In fairness to the emailer, I've got to say this. I did say I was not going to fly, and I ended up flying. But on the flip side of that, and we'll have another program, or we'll have a special program about what I feel we can do against the TSA, Sheila. I think we need to stand up against them to an extent. I've never experienced, since 2001, I've never experienced a TSA. I've talked about it, but never had the experience thereof. Okay, now until Bozeman. I almost had an extended stay there because of something that happened there, and it was early in the morning. We were tired. I was up the entire night before, and a TSA agent grabbed something from my hand, and that almost started, shall we say, a brawl.
Yeah.
But we need to fight this. I've never experienced it. Now I have. Now I know what I'm talking about. I've seen the inner workings of this. Now I'm going to tell you right now, it's on. The game is on.
Yeah, it's game on, right? Right on, Doug. I absolutely concur, because I think it's, it's absolutely mind-numbing what we allow, all in the name, all under this auspices of security. And, what's the quote about those who are willing to give up a little liberty for security deserve neither? And I think it's just absolutely, it's sickening what we have allowed. And, yes, that's right. People heard me. We've allowed it, because I think there is power in numbers, and I think that we've allowed way too much to go on. I always say I think our forefathers would be shooting by now, and it just absolutely sickens me when you see the depths that this country has been. There's an all-out war here. Again, it's a pillaging, plundering of everything we know, and we're getting pummeled 6 ways to Sunday on all fronts. And I just think it's time for people to snap out of their trance and actually do something. Don't be keyboard commandos and armchair patriots. This is time for people to act. And, I guess hence that's the reason of the fast, because we are on the precipice of very perilous times in these last days. And, I hate to harp on this, but I think the nation, Doug and Joe, has stood idly by while evil encapsulates our once great Christian nation. And I think we've turned our back on our God, certainly our faith in our brethren. I mean, we've taken God out of everything, and it's time to take action. And like I said, we've all heard of these million-man marches and these million-man mobilized militias and everything else, and I think these types of things they're ineffective. And that's why I was so compelled and so led to put on this fast, because it's based on the Word of God, and I know fasting and prayer is powerful. I know Pastor Langford spoke about the fast on Sunday, and it starts this Sunday. Last Sunday he was saying, in a week from today, and I think it's just going to be an absolute powerful time. And I'm so happy you and Joe are going to be involved. That's amazing. And I'm also, just so people know, I did come on this show and I did talk about the fast. And again, you pray about whatever you're going to fast, but for me, I'm doing the Esther 4:16 fast, where it says neither eat nor drink 3 days, 3 nights. I am going to be drinking water. I'm not going to be drinking like coffee or tea or frappuccinos from Starbucks. I'm just going to be drinking water the whole time, and we're going to be getting into the Word. And I've got a conference call prayer system set up, and the number I'll be posting on weekendvigilante.com. If you click on the Million Man Fast, there's going to be a number, and every day during the fast, starting tomorrow, which is Saturday, I'm going to have a prayer, basically like a prayer conference call, and I'm going to be posting a number and the ID number, and that's at 3 o'clock Pacific time tomorrow, and every day throughout the fast. So it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and I'll be posting that, like I said, on the site, the number, and I invite all intercessors and prayer warriors and really anyone that wants to join me and some of these prayer warriors and intercessors to pray during this. And I think that's really important, because we need to be praying. we need to be praying as well. And, you know, a lot of people have said, well, Sheila, what is the purpose of this fast really? And the primary purpose, Doug and Joe, is really to show God that we repent, we seek his face, we yearn to return our nation back over to him, and we seek to hear from him. And I mean, it's exciting because there's Christians across the globe that have emailed me saying, yeah, I believe this will be an epic, powerful, world-changing event, and it's really about uniting the brethren and seeing God move in our generation. And, you know, fasting and praying by a mass group is, I think, the single most effective way to unlock the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And, hey, where two or more are gathered, how about we're 1 million or more? So we've got lots of people going to get involved in this. And I think, again, it's just really, it can't be a better time to be doing this. And I think we're going to be all pleasantly surprised. And, you know, a lot of people have said, well, you know, do you think God is serious about what's going on in this country? God is as serious as a heart attack. And he's very concerned about the state of our nation. If we're concerned about it, how much more is God concerned about it? And, I mean, in the course of this fast, it's like you're killing the natural man. The spiritual man can then, you know, get wisdom and discernment from God. And it's a personal first step, I think. I mean, we're going to be having quarterly fasts. And, you know, the commonality is us as a collective group is really getting God's direction for our lives. And I think that, you know, yeah, everybody's at a different place, but I think we're all seeking a personal word from God, and we want to know what his intention is. There's got to be some humility and repentance, but I think it's about transformation, and I think we're going to see that occur. So, yeah,
folks,
that was my long-winded spiel.
No, it was great. Folks who are on social networking, or, well, folks, if you have a computer, go to the Weekend Vigilante. I'm sorry, I kind of screwed that up there. Weekend Vigilante. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, on the right-hand side under Sheila Zielinski, or next to her name is the link to her website. At her website is Million Man Fast. On the top of her website, click on that. It'll take you to a Facebook event page. Join. I just did. Okay, now I was going to ask you to walk me through that, but the more people who join, Sheila, is there any limit to how many people can join this? I mean, in terms of, does Facebook keep track, or does Facebook say, well, no, you can't have more than 5,000, or is it?
Well, you know, a lot of people don't have Facebook, and a lot of people have sent me emails saying, listen, I don't have Facebook, I don't have social media, but I'm going to be doing the fast. And I think that's wonderful. And the idea of the event page was just to kind of keep track, at least give us some numbers. And, I mean, it really isn't about numbers. It's just about really doing a heartfelt physical action. I mean, I just really believe this is something that we can do. We need to see the move of God here. Like I said, we're seeing a lot of ramp up of evil. You know, we're seeing the speed freight train railing into the New World Order here. So I really think that, you know, if anybody out in your audience, Doug, has read in Jonah where they're talking about Nineveh, I mean, we see God move. So, yeah, I mean, fasting really does move, and fast and prayer is so powerful. I've seen power in just 3 people fasting with me. So can you imagine? I'm excited about it.
I'm both Joe and I are tremendously excited about it. Sheila, and to the audience, I want to let you know that I am joining Sheila in this prayer and fasting for this 3 days. I have never, ever done it before, fasting, that is, in prayer. But I'm going to do this in the spirit in which it is being presented by Sheila. And I think, Sheila, it's a tremendous initiative because we have to fight. I mean, fighting here on the practical, real plane, it's a real thing. But so is fighting the principalities, in which prayer and fasting is necessary as well. But it sharpens our acuity, our spiritual acuity. I mean, it increases our spiritual acuity, I believe, and effectiveness. And I believe, you know, Sheila, we had 5 segments in a row. But in fact, W had suggested it. I had talked to Steve about it. Pastor Langford jumped on board last year. I don't know when it was, Joe. Last year we had 5 Sundays in a row where we had 5 Sunday programs, 5 prayer programs. It was right at the height of the Syrian.
I think it was fall, end of summer, beginning of fall.
that's when all the mischief was occurring with Syria, trying to get the U.S. And NATO tied up in Syria. And I really believe that we had something to do. Not we, meaning Joe and I, but we as the listener base had something to do via prayer with us changing the results of what happened. So I think what you're doing is going to be, once again, by orders of magnitude greater because of more people involved. And the objective is to change the way things are. So I do believe by prayer and fasting. I think that, Sheila, I've got to commend you on such a great initiative.
I think it was God-led because, Doug, only a supernatural moving of God's Spirit can really save us and delay judgment on our nation like he did with Nineveh. And God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So, he's no respecter of persons. Whatever he did then, he'll do now. And I think we have to have faith that we are going to see God move, and that's exciting.
Oh, tremendously. Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're at the top of the hour. We need to take a few minutes here. Sheila, hang with us. Do you mind? I know you're gracious with your time. Tonight's your broadcast, but hang with us because we're going to have Dave Hodges joining us. You and Dave did a fantastic interview last night, and we want to share with the people of your findings, Dave's findings, with respect to this, very unpleasant topic of child sex trafficking. I don't know how else to describe it. So hang with us, okay?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. All right, folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this very special Friday.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Friday, June 6, 2014. We are joined by our special guest, Sheila Zielinski, and now we are also joined by Mr. Dave Hodges. He has a website and a radio show that he does, and had some difficulties, ran into some trouble this week as he hit on a very important, sad, sick, and the topic of the CPS, the child sex kidnapping rings, and really hit the nail on the head. And
he was a guest with Sheila Zielinski on the Weekend Vigilante last night as well, which is why Sheila is on as well with Dave Hodges. Folks, I got so many emails when we were in Montana. Is Dave okay? Is Dave okay? Is Dave okay? Because his website was offline. People were just, they were wondering.
Tried to call you.
Yes, Dave. Dave from the Common Sense Show, welcome to the program.
Hi, guys, and it's great to be on with you again. And yes, it's been an interesting week, and I did take my website down for 2.5 days while I contemplated my actions. I like to think of this as a strategic withdrawal. There's some things I can't talk about because it may be litigated, but let's just say financially I've been under attack, and there were clear and definitive threats issued against myself and my family. So, and these were specific enough that they weren't the run-of-the-mill, I'll shoot you if I see you. These were very, very specific, and they knew things about the movements of myself and my family. And that's just why I took this very seriously.
So you were obviously under surveillance or associated or receiving threats from individuals who knew your schedule, who knew your family schedule, your schedule, where you would be at any given time, perhaps your wife, your children, that kind of thing. It was that serious, right?
Yes, it was that serious, and it was a well-coordinated attack. It wasn't just safety. Like I said, it was also financial, and it was coordinated across multiple fronts in my life.
My word. Sheila, you interviewed... Sheila, are you back, by the way? Are you with us?
I actually, this is really interesting. I emailed my a producer the archive to put into our system, and there was some very strange things that happened, and our archive disappeared off the server. So I thought that was really interesting. I did a full hour with Dave last night. We got into some we drilled down deep into the truth. And Dave's been a really good friend of the show. And one thing I always known about Dave, he's no stranger to tackling tough issues. And I mean, a few years ago, I gave him the handle, the instigator of the airwaves, and he has certainly lived up to that handle. I mean, he's been in the fight against these hucksters in the Kanamax corridor and the North American Union shenanigans, and he's certainly been on the globalist radar for a while. And you've been targeted in the past for really pushing the proverbial envelope, Dave, when it comes to drilling down deep in the truth. And as your readers and your media colleagues like me are keenly aware, I mean, you are absolutely targeted for, I believe, and I think you believe this too, is your, allegations of the child sex trafficking associated with some of the public officials and more nefarious tentacles. And, I mean, that is the bottom line, and it's just interesting that our archive is nowhere to be found. So fascinating, but it was a very good interview last night.
Well,
Dave.
We're just going to have to do it again because we're not going to be deterred. And this isn't the first time I've been down this road, but excuse me, this is the first time I've been down this road on such a wide spectrum of attacks. When I was on with Jim Mars back in, July of 2009, in the last minute of the show, I was broadcasting from my home in the city. I typically live out in the country in my other home. And I had 8 shots fired over my house. It was witnessed by my sister-in-law in the side yard and my next-door neighbor, who was a two-tour of Vietnam veteran, and took the police 27 minutes in the city to respond to multiple shots fired. And they even admitted they had dozens of calls. Jim was very concerned. He actually called me after the show, as did my news director, Annie DeRiso, and the police chalked it up in a later report that it was just fireworks from 3 blocks away, yet this was over 3 weeks after the 4th of July, and these weren't fireworks. These 2 people jumped out of a van, and they fired shots over. And you mentioned the Kanamax corridor and the North American Union. This is how I actually got involved in this. John McCain and his globalist forces through the CAFTA agreement, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, and they wanted to put a Kanamax corridor, which is the transportation arm of that agreement, through my area, and they were not paying us for eminent domain. They simply tried to force us off our land and use local government to do it. And I went on the warpath against McCain, exposed him. I started winning converts with our county commissioners and some of our state legislators, like Karen Johnson and Jack Harper, and they were instrumental in helping me. And we started to turn the tide of battle in 2009, and we got the Goldwater Institute, a public interest law firm, to take our case after everyone else had previously been afraid of McCain. And we filed suit, and that's when the shots happened. These incidences do not happen in isolation. And then about 4 months later, as we won the lawsuit because the other side backed down because they didn't want the public exposure of what I was going to bring into court, I'm driving home after coaching a college basketball game to my country home, and 2 gentlemen tried to run me off the road, and this went on for 11 minutes. It was all recorded in the Maricopa County 911 tapes, and the deputy sheriffs wouldn't do anything despite the fact I had a description, despite the fact that I drove to a fire station out here in the rural area where I live, and they witnessed some of this. And I went to the sheriff's headquarters. This is Sheriff Joe now, America's supposed toughest sheriff, to get a copy of the 911 tapes, and I was told they were missing. So this is my 3rd foray into being harassed in such a serious manner. So been down there this road before. Doug, I know you've been there, as many of us have.
Exactly, Dave. Now, what precipitated this? I mean, what's going on here? Is this just merely stemming from the child sex trafficking, if you will, or is this something greater, bigger, larger? You know what I feel like doing, with your permission, and Joe, your permission, Dave as well. Sheila, you had interviewed Dave last night, and I kind of feel like I want to step back and have you ask some questions of Dave as you did last night, only because I think that this needs to be memorialized and archived properly. Do you mind?
No, not at all. I mean, I think that Dave's Dave's experience and the story that is really preceding this and really the precipitation of it is. And as Steve Quayle has told you, Dave, you're over the target when you start getting big flack. And it, and great to have you back. I'm glad you decided to jump back in the saddle, Dave. We love you, and it sounds like you decided the safest place to be was on the top of the hit list. So good for you, Dave. You're not going to let this issue back you down. And
no, I never was. But I did, like I said, a strategic withdrawal, Sheila, after consulting with my attorney. He actually advised me not to take down my website. He said, you do nothing wrong. You don't advocate for violence. You don't call for the violent overthrow of the government. He said, all you're trying to do is make sense out of a chaotic world. And he'd been on my website numerous times. But I did decide, because of the personal nature of the threats, and we are probably going to subpoena the phone records that my carrier will not provide now, because the phone call came in on my cell phone. And it specifically mentioned speaking about, quote, the children. Well, the only time I've talked about the children publicly in recent memory is about child sex trafficking. And I ran an article last August, and I said, this is coming. And I talked about how the CPS agents across the country have now become de facto federal agents, because under Obamacare, there was a 110-page document that was written and commissioned by a group called the ICF, a UN think tank group. It was adopted by Catherine Sebelius of HHS, and it was the field manual in which dictated how CPS agents could operate and what leeway they had to go into homes and steal children. And if you don't mind, with your guys' permission, let me just give you a few examples, because none of you parents out there who have kids and none of your kids who have your grandkids, they're not safe. And let me explain to you what I'm talking about. In the document, this 110-page document, CPS can come into your home for literally no reason at all. They can take your kids for what they call educational neglect. And this is the presence of bad grades on your kids' report cards. Yet I read this document from cover to cover. Nowhere in there does it say what a bad grade is. Now, in our family, if my son came home with a C, we'd consider that to be a bad grade in most situations. But they don't specify, so they leave it open-ended to the field agent to determine. They also have a violation of parental authority over children called isolation neglect. Isolation neglect is if you were to ground your child, prevent them from playing with their friends or being involved in social media, they call this isolation neglect, and can take your kids. If you have beer in the home, they can take your kids. If you have a gun in the home, you're a registered gun owner, or if you're not, they can take your kid. There is no end to what they can do. If your child has missed 5 days of school in any 1 month, they can come in and say that's educational neglect and take your kid. So the CPS agents now are acting with extreme fervor. They have unbridled authority, and now they're working in concert with other state-run CPS agencies. And let me give you an example. One of the cases we're going to talk about tonight involves State Department employee with a security clearance, Monica Wesolowski, who got SWAT-teamed, and then CPS came in and took her then 4-year-old boy last December. They couldn't prove anything against Monica. She had done nothing wrong. So and this is in Virginia, the Illinois CPS shows up at the parent's house demanding that her parents, who live in Illinois, sign a statement saying, if you want to see your grandkid again, you will sign this statement that says that your daughter Monica abuses her son. So now we're seeing interagency cooperation because these CPS agents are now federalized. And if they're federalized, guys, there's nothing to protect them. Let me just give you a brief synopsis of what's happened to Monica's son. Monica's son is autistic. He's since turned 5, and CPS found an eczema patch on his neck. They didn't come into her house and SWAT team her with any specific allegations. They examined the boy, and they talked to him for 2.5 hours, and they found an eczema, dermatitis patch on his neck, and they said, oh, I see you strangle your child. and they use that as a justification to take the boy. Yet the police are right there, and if there was any really clear evidence that it happened, the police would have arrested Monica and taken her to jail. But no such allegations have ever been mentioned. Well, the boy was placed in a foster home, and unknown to CPS, the neighbors knew Monica, and she asked them to take the boy to a pediatrician to get an examination, and the pediatrician said there has been no abuse perpetrated against this boy. This is simply dermatitis or eczema. Monica tried to use this in her CPS proceedings, and they wouldn't even bother to look at the evidence from the pediatrician. The CPS agents of Virginia were so upset that they took away the boy from the first foster home and put the boy in a second foster home with 2 gay fathers. Now, this is a boy, now he turns 5. He's been potty trained for over 2 years. Normal boy, except for the fact he does have a disability and he has some spectrum of autism. Well, as the boy began to live more with these 2 fathers, he would run around when Monica would see him, moving his arms and sexual gesture motioning and saying, cut my arms off, cut my arms off. This 5-year-old who had been potty trained for over 2 years was now again wearing diapers and defecating in his pants, and Monica found evidence of a rash on his anus. I've seen the proof. The proof is so graphic, I don't dare put it on my website so as not to offend people, but I've seen the proof of this. So has CPS, so has the Fairfax Assistant County Attorney, Chris Ziegler, and so has the local police department, and yet they take the boy away from Monica for no reason, and yet with these 2 fathers, they let this abuse continue. The boy is also mandated, because of his autism, to have occupational therapy paid by the state, and this is not happening. Monica is a Catholic, and CPS regulations mandate that the religious practices of the children will continue. This isn't happening. It's just one big pile of poo, yet this is going on all over the country. Since I first ran this story in the 3rd week of May, I have heard from disaffected CPS agents all over the country, including in Virginia, and they said this is par for the course. Many of these foster children disappear, as Nick Bryant so eloquently wrote in the book called The Franklin Scandal, and this is how many children end up being sex trafficked. So I'm writing about this. Now, simultaneous to this, I'm also coming across information from some of my better insider sources that Ambassador Chris Stevens was not just gun running to al-Qaeda, he was supporting the gun running operations designed to take out Gaddafi and Assad, and he was doing this with drug money. And then later allegations came up and said he was also involved in child sex trafficking. He was murdered 2 months before the election, and the smart money says Stevens had to be taken out, so this information didn't surface during the campaign. Now, these were the issues that I was focused on at the time that I got harassed and threatened. And the child sex trafficking was clearly mentioned to me in the threat, and said, stop writing about the children or you're going to have to worry about your family. So I know it's a long story here, but I think it's important for the audience to know.
Do you find it interesting, though, that this woman is a God-fearing constitutionalist with an NRA, obviously clearly NRA member, and suddenly the IRS attacked her. She was getting drug screening. I mean, that's all very convenient, isn't it? Especially when other coworkers and cohorts were not subject to the same drug screening.
Well, that's true. Here's the bottom line. Monica is a GS-9. She has no outside employment, and she's paid by the federal government. So why in the world would the IRS have to audit someone like this? They already know where the money's coming in from, and easy to find out where the money's going out to. So I don't know why they'd have to audit her. But the IRS is also the enforcement agent for Obamacare, and Obamacare now monitors child welfare through control of HHS and ultimately CPS. So it makes sense to me that the IRS was involved. But it wasn't just that. As you said, Sheila, she started being drug tested. Now, she's been a 9-year employee. There's been no change in her work habits and her work performance. Why would you all of a sudden start drug testing someone? Because you're harassing her. Well, this is what I've discovered. Monica had some social interactions with a gentleman who was writing to Congressman Frank Wolf of the 10th Congressional District in Virginia. And this is actually, some of this is in my story in terms of the fact that Congressman Wolf has now admitted there's child sex trafficking in Fairfax County, Virginia, where Monica lives. This is on his congressional website, and I copied and pasted it and put quote marks around it word for word this morning. What I didn't reveal in this article, and I'm saving it up for later salvos against CPS, is that Congressman Wolf had an insider source who Monica knew socially. Her boy was friends with this man's daughter, and he was putting out prolific amounts of information about child sex trafficking to congressmen, including Congressman Wolf, and he died under very, very mysterious circumstances, and that's when the harassment of Monica started. So she doesn't know anything about the sex trafficking. She was not my source, but that doesn't mean the other side, the bad guys, didn't consider her to be an operational leak. And when you add to the fact that she works in a liberal organization and she has an NRA bumper sticker on her car and she's a practicing Catholic, she would be perfect whistleblower material, and I can see why she was targeted. And then when I tell this story, people say, well, why would the Virginia CPS agree to do this dirty work for the federal government and purge a federal employee that they feel is going to be a security leak? Well, here's why. When her son Dylan was taken, the Virginia CPS receives a $5,000 remuneration. And Monica's ex-husband's last name was Rodriguez. And so the boy carries the father's name, so he's designated as being Hispanic, in other words, a minority, and that brings more cash payment from the feds. And because the boy has a disorder, a disability called autism, that's even worth more money for remuneration from the feds. So the Virginia CPS are into flesh peddling for profit's sake. Now, off the record, and she won't be off the record for long, after she moves during the 4th of July weekend, a former Virginia CPS agent not too far from this area is going to come on my show, and she's going to state the following, that the Virginia CPS forges documents and fabricates evidence and engages in all kinds of fraud to try to take as many kids away from law-abiding parents as possible. And she said, what's happened to Monica is par for the course. But she did say this, too, and this is interesting to me. She said, essentially, they like to go after the poor and the minorities because they typically don't have the resources to fight back. Monica is kind of the exception to this because she's a GS-9 with the federal government with a security clearance. So this has led all of us to believe that this is part of political targeting, and the Virginia CPS is all too happy to help because they get the financial remuneration from being the middleman. And let me just state one more thing here, and then I promise I'll take a breath. When Monica came on my show a couple of weeks ago, the assistant county attorney, Chris Sigler, wrote to Monica's attorney of record at the time and basically said things aren't going to go well if she keeps going to the media. And this Magda Alarcon, who's the social worker for the Department of Family Services that's managing taking away her son Dylan, said about Monica, well, that so-and-so went to the media and she's psychologically unstable, and because she went to the media, she has endangered her son, and because of that, she will never get her son back. So they're trampling on her First Amendment rights. Monica now is representing herself pro se. The Supreme Court has upheld the fact that you can represent yourself pro se. The county attorney, Chris Sigler, has said he won't meet with her until she has an attorney. So this is a violation of her Fifth Amendment due process rights and her 14th Amendment equal protection rights under the Constitution. This is government in action in Northern Virginia, and it's all one big incestuous ring. The police won't act on reports of sexual abuse when they have the evidence. The county attorney ignores it, and the CPS and the DFS, Department of Family Services, they're facilitating these crimes against this boy.
Well, Dave, let's address a fundamental baseline issue here. I mean, these CPS agents, you know, you're right, they're de facto feds, but totally gone as any pretense of any due process and following the rule of law. So essentially parental authority and rights hang by a thread under Obamacare regulations, like you said, innocuous behaviors like poor grades, or they flag them if there's a gun in the home. And there is a myriad of reasons. It's mind-numbing. But here's the bottom line. It's well chronicled how perverted and pedophiliac, I mean, let's think of the inbred Illuminati kingpins and how well chronicled it is what they're involved in. I want to make the jump into some more nefarious tentacles of all this.
In terms of?
Well, I mean, look at the, let's talk about number one. What do they want in this child? Why do they want her child? I mean, it really is it's the perfect plan, isn't it? I mean, 80 kids have disappeared. You've reported on that show.
Yeah, out of the state of Oklahoma and their CPS, exactly. And these kids have still never been accounted for. I wondered what they were doing at bed check and meal call, and it's amazing. So I think what you're asking me, Sheila, is who's the power behind this?
Right on.
I'll say this, and let me answer from the middle, and I'll go from middle to top. At the middle levels, what I'm discovering is the people might be in a position to know, but they don't want to know. Or they might be in a position to know, but they back away from knowing, but they know what they're supposed to say and not say, and this is why the police in Fairfax County don't investigate what's happening to Dylan. And why did they target her kid? Very simply, I'll repeat what Monica said, that one of the gay fathers, what he said to her, "Oh, we just love your blonde-haired child." And I think that speaks volumes right there in combination with all the other symptoms that I've told you about. How high does it go? Well, George Soros gave $2 million a few years ago to NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, whose moniker phrase is sex before 8 or it's too late. And they actively advocate for pedophilia, and yet our Justice Department just says, oh, well, it's her constitutional right. Yet Monica gets punished and loses visitation time with her son for her constitutional right to come on my show. I interviewed Brandon Turbeville about a year and a half ago, and he and I were actually involved in the restoration of a lady named Katrina Jalevich out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Very similar circumstances, but we were able to exert enough pressure, and I say we, mostly Brandon, to bring these two, her son and the mother, back together. What Brandon discovered, he wrote an article, I believe, and he's working on a book that talked about the royal family's involvement. Prince Charles has been involved deeply with Jimmy Savile. In fact, actually, I found evidence on my own that Savile actually served as a marriage counselor to Princess Di and her failed royal marriage.
Good
and
Lord.
Savile, as we know, is one of the most notorious perverts, and this information's leaked. He used to sneak into hospitals at night wearing his clown costume, and the nurses and doctors would cringe because they knew they couldn't stop him. And it was at children's hospitals he'd visit, and he'd target kids for sexual activity, his own personal gratification. So I think the royal family's clearly involved. When you read about this, a lot of the trails lead to the Queen of England. She traffics kids through her groups like Common Purpose. Bush has been implicated by, and I'm saying Pappy Bush, by the Washington Times in an article in 1989. My late friend of the CIA, Bill Pollack, who was the wife of Annie DeRiso, my news director, has told Annie and I for years that in fact, Nick Bryant talked about this in the Franklin scandal, that when congressmen get elected or senators get elected, many of them go to parties at the Franklin House, and they're having sex with underage prostitutes that are part of these child sex trafficking rings. And when they need a key vote changed in a negative situation, say like Obamacare, and you remember how many people changed their votes at the midnight hour to make it pass? They break out the videotapes, and they own these people forever. So at a minimum, this stretches into the White House. the royal family. And Sheila, let me just tell the listening audience here something that I mentioned on your show last night, and that's the Jerry Sandusky case. And this is how serious. I'm sorry?
The Second Mile Foundation.
Yeah, the Second Mile Foundation and Jerry Sandusky and the Penn State sex ring scandal. But what a lot of people don't know, and I actually wrote about this, and I was surprised that more people didn't pick up on this. Sandusky had been turned in to the authorities for years, but Penn State football in that community is like a god, and you don't mess with them. A county attorney in Center County named Ray Grykar took these allegations and ignored them at first, and he reached a point where he told his colleagues, I can no longer ignore these allegations against Sandusky and the fact that the Second Mile Foundation is pimping these kids out. And he started to look into this. Well, let me tell you what happened to Ray Grykar. Now, this is a county attorney, the county attorney. We're not talking the custodian at Penn State who walked into a shower room and saw Sandusky, sodomizing a 10-year-old child. That made the media. But here's Ray Grykar, a public official, county attorney, and he's investigating Sandusky and Second Mile. Well, they never found Ray Grykar's body. They found his car at a convenience store, and the FBI found his laptop in a riverbed, but it was so destroyed they said they couldn't pull any information off of it. In other words, a county attorney was murdered to cover up these crimes. Now, the media was hot on the Second Mile Foundation. After all, it had been one of Pappy Bush's 1,000 points of light. And as the investigation deepened, we started seeing some of the people involved in the board of directors of the Second Mile Foundation, and the names were pretty prominent, and the affiliations went into the governor's office of Pennsylvania, and there were rumors it was going to go to the Senate. And all of a sudden, somebody flipped the media switch, and Sandusky's guilty, goes to jail, case closed, and you don't hear about it anymore. That's how much control these pedophiliacs have over this. And Sheila, we'd be remiss if we didn't tell people that where you find pedophilia, you also find satanic rituals and satanic sacrifices. Many of these kids are killed in snuff films, and if they're not killed in snuff films, they're so drugged up, as Nick Bryant pointed out in his book, that when they do come forward and try to tell their story, no one takes them seriously because of their addiction problems. This is a systemic problem in the top leadership in the world, and no one's doing anything about it.
Well, and I think you mentioned something, again, is well chronicled, is how viscerally perverted these pedophiliac hucksters are. I mean, Bohemian Grove, ring a bell? When you're dealing with satanic rituals and satanic ritual abuse, we just left a conference, like I said last night, Dave, Russ Dizdar, he has actually pulled open a lot of cases across the nation where there's children involved, and could be 80 kids at a time. I wonder how do 80 children disappear and nobody, nothing to see here, folks. These videotapes of, these very prominent people having sex with young children, you just said their mantra. I think that's disgusting. What is it? Their moniker saying sex before 8 or it's too late?
Yeah, NAMBLA, North American Man-Boy Love Association, sex before 8 or it's too late. And here's George Soros, the collapser of economies, friends to all the presidents and the Federal Reserve people, and he's supporting NAMBLA.
$2 million donation. Isn't that what you said?
Well, yeah. Well, and it's not just him. If you look at Nick Bryant's evidence trail and John DeCamp, state senator from Nebraska's evidence trail,
right.
A guy named Lawrence King was involved, and this involved a bank failure involving about $400 million back in the 80s. But what came out of this investigation as a byproduct was something the feds didn't want to come out, and that was his involvement in Boys Town and sex trafficking all the way to the White House. Interestingly enough, Herman Cain, who was then the head of the Kansas City Federal Reserve, was brought in to clean up the mess. And for his work, and we know Herman Cain had his own sexual issues in his presidential campaign, but Herman Cain was given $30 million to Godfather Pizza, which he owns, to clean up Lawrence King's mess. This is a systemic problem with leadership in this country. And like I said, no one's paying attention. If you talk about this, people think that you're wearing a tinfoil hat. Yet the evidence is overwhelming. When I see pictures of a rash on a kid's 4-year-old anus and the CPS of Virginia is doing nothing about it, what does that tell you? Who are they really working for?
Well, there's obviously a connection between NAMBLA and the CPS de factos here. Would you agree with that, Dave?
There is no question. The late Nancy Schaefer, state senator from Georgia, who died under extremely suspicious circumstances, said, well, she died of a gunshot wound, and her husband, who supposedly killed her in this murder-suicide, shot himself in the back. He must have had really long arms. I should have had him on my basketball team when I was coaching. Could have blocked every shot in the gym. But Nancy Schaefer said that CPS loses kids, a certain percentage of kids, and they go into child sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And in some communities, kids are just snatched off the street.
Well,
and
it's mind-numbing.
You know what the cover for this was back in the 80s? Do you guys remember this? Here was the cover. The joke used to be, oh, the kid's on a milk carton, missing kid.
Right.
That was the cover. These were many of the kids that were sex trafficked. There was one gal that came out, that a researcher who's now gone into hiding because she's afraid for her life, so I won't mention her name, but she mentioned the woman's name. She came out. I heard an audio tape interview, and she was telling her story about how she was trafficked into the White House. But they drugged her up, and when she escaped, she tried to tell her story. And you're a drug addict. No one will take you seriously. You were hooked on heroin and cocaine. And this is how they cover their tracks.
And it's mind-numbing. It is to peer into the reach of these shadowy forces associated with CPS agencies across the country. And as Dave alluded to, Doug, I mean, think of the untimely death of Nancy Schaefer. She was exposing the international component parts of these alleged nefarious practices, and we know her untimely death was quite interesting. So isn't that fascinating?
Sheila, you're doing fantastic with you and Dave are doing fantastic. I want to stay out of the way as much as possible because I think you guys are hitting the crux of the issue. I just want to remind people about the Franklin cover-up. By the way, folks, you can order the Franklin cover-up on Amazon. In fact, I would suggest you do. Child Abuse, Satanism, and Murder in Nebraska by John W. DeCamp. I find it interesting that at the epicenter of this, Larry King, not the talk show guy, but the savings and loan individual, is in prison, but not for child abuse, under a plea bargain that was arranged and finalized with federal prosecutors back in 1991. King was sentenced to 15 years for embezzlement and conspiracy, making false financial record entries. Nothing about child trafficking at all. And you're right, Dave. People look at you like you've got two heads when you talk about this kind of stuff, reaching into the White House, into the federal, state, local, county legislatures, the departments, agencies, and whatever. But the fact of the matter is, this is going on today. And Dave, you hit on, and Sheila, last night in your interview with Dave, I mean, you pulled this out so well. Dave has been hitting on certain issues that are so it's a minefield, and no, it's no wonder people are attempting to shut you up, Dave, and we need to stand behind you and go. Sheila, go ahead. I just wanted to make sure people knew that
it's just interesting because if you look at, there's a historian, Philip Jenkins, and he was exploring hot topics such as the Franklin allegations and whether or not they're worthy of attention or, credible on their own merits. I mean, they were seized by political opportunists on their own purposes. But the point is, even if there was lack of inherent credibility, the interesting thing is there's numerous, here we go with the quote, conspiracy theories evolved and persist. And, there's been a widespread series of crimes, including devil worship, cannibalism, medical experimentations, and, widespread drug trafficking. So, I mean, the CIA arms dealing with links with the first Bush administration, as Dave alluded to, Pappy Bush. And yet, here's a really interesting link that I want to get you to get into, Dave. There's also, Pappy Bush was also in bed with none other than good old chairman of Goldman Sachs. Well, he was a banker before that, and then director general of the World Trade Organization and BP. Get where I'm going with this?
Yes.
In fact, you wrote an article calling him the. Tell people about that.
Well, Pappy Bush, when you investigate sex trafficking, all roads end with Pappy Bush. I can't spend an afternoon investigating this without coming up with his name. He's named too many times. Now, what he's really good at is he's 2 degrees of separation away from revelation and discovery. But, when all the roads lead to your house, okay, the kids are ending up there too. And his White House exploits with the White House page scandal, those are notorious. He was involved in this. The man is an absolute animal. He's a pervert. And these people at the upper levels, let me digress for a second. I recently took my son to see the movie Captain America. And in the movie, SHIELD was, which is this planetary security system, was being taken over by a nefarious group called Hydra. Let's call them the Bilderbergs, just for the sake of argument. And what's interesting is in the movie, the organization SHIELD had been infiltrated from the inside by the Bilderbergs. And in fact, they even had these little greetings where they'd say, Heil Hydra. And this is what we're seeing. It's almost like you're part of the club, you're in a secret society, and one of the duties you have as a member of the secret society is to facilitate or participate in, or both, the sex trafficking of children. It's almost like a rite of passage. Some of the people, I suppose if I want to get sued into the Stone Age, I'd start naming names here, but some of the people move up in the globalist hierarchy by transporting kids. It's kind of like the chauffeur for the mafia, and then they earn their stripes there, and then they move up to a higher level. Well, I found the same thing in child sex trafficking, but to a T, I can tell you unequivocally that satanic rituals are involved in this. And in fact, I'm going to step out on a ledge here because what the heck, someone's targeted me already. The JonBenet Ramsey case comes into this.
Absolutely.
And this is really interesting to me. Now, originally, I'm from Denver, and Denver is not too far from Boulder, where this murder took place. And for those who are young people in the audience, JonBenet Ramsey was a 6-year-old girl that won all these little kids' beauty contests. Her parents dressed her up inappropriately to make her look like she was a teenager. Total exploitation of this child. She lost her youth. Well, she was murdered in the basement of her home. Eventually, they found semen on the body. She'd been sexually assaulted and then strangled. Her mother, Patty, had written a fake ransom note, and Patty didn't go to jail. The father, John Ramsey, he didn't go to jail, and his company, Allied Signal, which was a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, was interestingly headquartered in Amsterdam, which is the heart of child sex trafficking. And the neighbors around the Ramseys were saying that they routinely saw people in robes chanting weird songs. There's your Satanism. And some people think that this poor little girl was a satanic sacrifice. And whether the parents had anything directly to do with the murder of this girl is arguable. But here's what's interesting. Alex Hunter, the DA, came under extreme criticism from some of the local media in Denver. And I knew some of the local media like Peter Boyles, and they'll tell you they were told to shut the heck up and stop talking about it. And this came down from some of the highest sources. Well, there was another guy called Kelvin McNeil in the case. He's very interesting to me. Kelvin McNeil was the PR guy for Boulder County, and he was critical of Alex Hunter, saying, how could you not indict the parents in minimum of co-conspirators? And there were allegations of, satanic ritualistic abuse and so forth. Well, Kelvin McNeil got fired from his position, and he went to work for a well-known Agenda 21 advocate, and he was promptly sent on his first mission to Amsterdam, where he was struck by a car and killed in a hit-and-run accident that was never solved by the authorities. And who had affiliations with John Ramsey? it's the same politicians today that are running Colorado. They're called the Gang of Four. Now, you people who are listening in on Doug's show tonight, Doug and Joe's show, you know who the Gang of Four are. You know exactly who they are. You know they're the ones that got passed. You can't trap rainwater. You can't till more than 50% of your farmland. They're huge into Agenda 21. And these were friends of the Ramseys.
Well, and Dave, do you find it interesting that it turns out that Ramsey's father was a board member of British Petroleum, and he also, there was connections with the Trilateral Commission. Well, who else do we know? I'll give you a little hint. Former chairman of Goldman Sachs.
Oh,
also,
Peter Sutherland, yeah.
Peter Sutherland, Director General of the World Trade Organization, and, well, he's evil incarnate, isn't he, Dave?
Well, Peter Sutherland, and not to belabor and go too far astray from what we're talking about, but there were 5 major money movements on the day that the BP oil rig owned by Transocean blew up, and they all moved money and froze stock options for preferred insiders, within 2 weeks to the same day of the explosion. And BP and Goldman Sachs were heavily involved, and Peter Sutherland used to be the CEO of BP, and shortly before the explosion, they created a position for him at Goldman Sachs called non-executive CEO. Now, what's interesting about that is I'm finding links now between TEPCO, Goldman Sachs, and Peter Sutherland. So it seems like whenever there is a huge disaster, Peter Sutherland's name keeps showing up.
And the 98 winner of the David Rockefeller Leadership Award. No connection there.
No, there is a connection. Think about what Rockefeller wants, depopulation.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
A lot of people don't even know this, and I've written about this, and I wrote a 7-part series on the Gulf, and I quoted Wilma Subra and an Oregon State researcher named Kim Anderson, and they were testing the blood of people in the Gulf. And they were finding levels of cancer-causing benzene as a result of the poison Corexit being sprayed and the oil coming ashore. And these people had 65 times the amount on average of benzene in their bodies. We won't know this for a while, but I will tell you, if you look at the population trend curve, if we go out and project this out 30, 40 years, I think we're going to see a substantial decrease in the lifespan of people in the Gulf, and I think it could decrease by as much as 20 to 25%. I'm friends with people in the Gulf now as a result of my investigation, and I interviewed Kendra Arneson, who was actually on Jesse Ventura's show on the same subject, and I've talked to Kendra a lot. She said where she lives in Plaquemines Parish, which is a peninsula, meaning they got hit from 3 sides, she said everyone in her daughter's school is sick. They all are getting asthma. They all get all kinds of illnesses. And now they're talking in Japan along the same lines of covering this all up by putting sick people in concentration camps. I've been reading about that recently so they can obscure these facts from the media. In fact, BP is paying still for some of the health care of people in the Gulf, and they misdiagnose everything to take the attention off of what they did. Yet if you take these people inland, as some public interest groups have, if you take them inland 200-300 miles, you get Corexit toxicity, benzene toxicity resulting from the oil spill. And that's Peter Sutherland. Say hi to Peter Sutherland. And the guys who dispersed the payouts, BP was mandated to pay out $20 billion in restitution to lost business and health concerns of the Gulf, restoration of the ecosystem. And to date, they've only paid out $4 billion. And the reason why? Because Peter Sutherland's friend, Ken Feinberg, the same guy who screwed the first responders at 9/11 and refused to cover their insurance needs, he did the same thing in the Gulf by allowing BP to only pay $4 billion. That's how corrupt these animals are. Should we be surprised that so many of the elite are involved in child sex trafficking?
Well, did you see a smug look at the Bilderberg? And, of course, I'll have Daniel Estelin soon on the show talking about this Bilderberg update, his smug look. And one of the things on the agenda was they really have to revisit these forced vaccinations, Dave, because, after all, Hillary Clinton, it takes a village to raise a child. We're hearing that mantra, aren't we?
Takes the village people to raise a child in Monica Lewinsky's case, where her boy is being molested in the custody of 2 gay fathers. Can I say they're doing that to him? No, but someone's doing it to him, and someone's doing it right under their noses. So it takes the village people to raise a child. YMCA, maybe we should break out into the song. And if I'm sorry, if I sound like I'm really angry, I am. I am one pissed off individual that this is happening to our kids, and no one's speaking up for our kids. Tens of thousands of our children are being stolen every year under false pretenses by these animals to live a life of unimaginable horror, and we're not doing a damn thing about it.
Well, and as Newt Gingrich said when Alex Jones came to talk to him about Bohemian Grove, I don't know what you're talking about, Dave. Remember?
Yeah, I saw the clip. Yeah, good old Newt, the same guy who divorced his wife in the hospital with stage 4 cancer so he could marry his new girlfriend. That's who we elect to Congress. So should we be surprised that our kids are being trafficked? You know, it's just we had No Child Left Behind in education. Now in Congress we should call it No Child Left with a Behind, because that's what's happening to thousands of our kids.
Well,
and this is unacceptable.
Yeah, it's
and
unacceptable.
These people can kill me, but I hope I inspire enough of my media colleagues to take this forward, because any culture that will not defend the elderly, the infirm, and the young does not deserve to survive. This country does not deserve to survive if we don't stand up for our kids.
Well spoken, Dave.
Sheila and Dave, we're at the top of the hour. We're going to take a very short break.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 3 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Friday, June 6, 2014, with our very special guest, Dave Hodges, The Common Sense Show, and Sheila Zielinski, Weekend Vigilante. Check out Sheila's new show tonight. That is midnight Eastern Time. Go to her website, Weekend Vigilante, and if you want, you can go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, our website, and get the information there for both of our guests and their shows. With that, Sheila, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're doing a fantastic job hitting these questions, as you interviewed Dave yesterday.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dave, so really, I think the culmination of what we're dealing with here is, let's just say this: your child isn't safe from the global elite. I mean, you've made connections with Prince Charles, Queen Elizabeth, and Pappy Bush. And, I mean, even in light of your revelations, Dave, in both Virginia and Illinois, these CPS workers, how many have come forward, just contacted you in total, Dave, in the last couple of weeks?
I've had, since I ran the first article on Monica in the third week of May, I've heard from 9 CPS agents. Wow. If I'm correct, I think 4 of them are out of Virginia. 2 of them are actively talking to me now. They all have apprehension because they all say the same thing. The police, the prosecutors, the defense attorneys are all in bed, literally and figuratively, together, and they said it's one big happy club, and one hand washes the other. There's no advocate for the mother. And it's very rare that these parents get their kids back. They have to know someone prominent to get help. And this is what I hear from the CPS agents, and that when the CPS agent goes into a home, their goal is to make money for the agency. They have an informal, unspoken quota system, and they're supposed to raise so much money, so they're looking to extract your kid from your home. And what I said was going to happen under Obamacare with regard to this issue is now happening. And I said this last August.
You did.
I said that we will see people politically targeted. Monica Wesolowski is such a person. We're also seeing the fact that the CPS agents now are motivated by greed, professional greed, and they're motivated by money. And so this is leading to the high number of child extractions happening here all across our country. And the stories are the same. I've got stories from Texas and from Colorado and from California, and people have come out of the woodwork to contact me on this. And they're all told the same thing by their CPS agents, that if you speak about this publicly, you'll never see your kid again. This is a universal complaint that I'm hearing. And I'm telling people, if you don't speak up in unison, you'll never see your kid again. We need to stand against this tyranny and let the cards fall where they may. I don't advocate for violent overthrow of the government, but if it starts, this should sure be one hell of a good way to get it started.
But Dave, if the tentacles
like
reach right up to look at this UK High Court Justice Fulford, advisor to the Queen, and look at what's happening along with Pope Francis in that international court proceedings. I mean, look into their involvement in trafficking rings and these evidence cover-ups. So, how many pieces of evidence in that, was that in Hague? Yeah, it was ICC International Court. It implicated former Pope Joseph Ratzinger to child rapists, and that was the same Brussels International Court that issued arrest warrants on Queen Elizabeth, your pal.
There you go, exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
I was just going to bring that up, Sheila. You're right. The Queen has already been found guilty of trafficking in children.
Yes, and she was actually convicted last year.
Yeah, this isn't Dave Hodges and Sheila Zielinski sitting around thinking about ways to mentally masturbate. This is absolutely happened at the top levels of the royal family. And you know what's interesting about that? Speaking of the royal family, how many of our presidents have not been related to the royal family?
There isn't any.
Exactly. It's just, as George Carlin said, and I'll clean it up for radio, it's just one big club, and you ain't in the club.
Well, I mean, and it's not something to joke about, but I mean, do you find it interesting, though, that Pope Ratzinger resigned from office the same day that the Queen was actually convicted of the disappearance of those children?
Yes.
Fascinating, isn't it? And, of course, the Pope Benedict and Queen Elizabeth's use of a Vatican agreement called, criminal solicitation. They prevented a release of information to legal authorities for prosecution of crimes against an estimated, I think it's millions of priest-child abuse victims. And it's just absolutely mind-numbing that there's no accountability for these people. No accountability at all.
Friends,
and there never will be.
Yeah, Dave and Sheila, let me stop you. Friends listening to this broadcast, I hope this gives you a fantastic insight into, number one, the weekend Vigilante show with Sheila Zielinski. I hope this gives you fantastic insight into her interviewing style, her questions, her massive knowledge of what's going on. Number two, I hope this gives you tremendous insight into the Common Sense Show, into the knowledge, the investigation, the research, the time spent by Dave Hodges at great personal risk. I hope by listening to this and by us standing back here, giving them the forum, I hope that you will tune in tonight to Sheila Zielinski's program at midnight Eastern Time. And I hope, above all hopes as well, that you tune in to Dave Hodges' show and both of their websites. We need to support these two brave individuals. We need to all stand behind them. Sheila, thank you. Keep going, please. I don't want to stop you, but I don't want to tire you as well, because I know that in a few short hours you've got a big show to do. But this is so unbelievable.
This topic gears me up because I share the same sentiments as Dave. I am outraged that we sit idly by. And I mean, this, like Dave said, this isn't stuff we sit around and make up. Look at Rodriguez and Archibald. They reported in the Washington Times. There was a Washington, D.C. People can actually go and look that up. There was a prostitution ring that, it had intimate connections with this is Washington Times. Like, again, as Dave alluded to, I mean, the White House all the way up to President George H.W. Bush, it was male prostitutes had been given access to the White House, and the article incited that, there was lots of evidence for minors that were abducted for use in these child sex trafficking and were pimped out to the elite. Dave alluded to it earlier. They've got these videotaped who's who of the globalists having sex with children. It's been going on for years. Nick Bryan's a good case of that. These snuff films that come out. I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting. And the claims were dismissed by authorities as fantasy. And I think it was the Nebraska state senator, John DeCamp, later investigated the claims, and he was horrified to learn that they were indeed legitimate. And, of course, Bush was implicated in DeCamp's investigation. But how quickly we forget. Interesting.
Well, it is interesting, but it's something that has really hit me over the last year. I know the globalists are involved in every level of our life, and this is one shining example. But what a lot of people I don't think realize, and what I've come to fully appreciate in the last year, is the globalists are involved in every fabric of our life.
Yeah.
Everything we do has some type of globalist origin or implication. Everything. We have been successfully invaded. And you know, we know where this is headed. If you know the Georgia Guidestones and know the depopulation quotes, you know what's coming. In fact, let me just digress for a second, and Doug, I think you'll find this interesting. In the last few days, because I've been very, very public, I've somehow become like a lightning rod for all people that want to do disclosure. And I've heard from people inside the State Department, not Monica, inside the CIA, inside the FBI, inside the NSA, 4 contacts in the last 3 days. And what we're witnessing in the federal government, and this has huge implications for our future, what we're witnessing is a redundancy of administrative duties, the massive hiring of new people, the shifting of responsibilities to different geographic locations. For example, one guy in the FBI told me that we're relocating to the near-empty building in Phoenix, the federal building, and also to one in Las Vegas. The CIA, we know, have been moving operations for years underneath Denver International Airport, but that dispersion of CIA duties and administrative duties has continued. And Homeland is going through decentralization, as is the State Department. They're all going through a purge. And I step back and I look at this, and no one mentioned this term to me. So this is all Dave Hodges' just summary conclusion. But the words continuity of government came into mind. And then I went and read Paul Craig Roberts' article on the fact that the United States is preparing to launch a first nuclear strike against China and Russia. And when Dr. Roberts first wrote that, my first reaction was, no, we're not going to do that. And then I dug into it. I thought, well, let me look at this a little deeper. And this all ties together with the decentralization of federal agencies and what I found. Pravda came out yesterday, and they said that the U.S. has been bleeding Russia dry and China dry for some time, and this is what nations do before they attack. And they talked about the United States' plans to invade Russia and China. And I found Russia Today is talking about this. I have found evidence now that we're on the Wolfowitz, back to that doctrine from 1992, which says we can't permit the rise of another superpower, and that was written shortly after the collapse of the Soviet Union, or the alleged collapse. And so we are going to launch these attacks, and here's the battle plan. And Paul Craig Roberts is exactly right from what I'm reading in other sources. And these are sources he didn't even cite where I found information. I'm coming out with this article in the morning that says Paul Craig Roberts is right, and he's right beyond the reasons that he even cites. We launch a first strike. A lot of it, now he didn't say this, I'm saying this, a lot of it will first come from nuclear submarines because they're so hard to detect and follow. And the response time of the Russians and the Chinese will be greatly, greatly minimized. And these submarines operate in stealth, and so they are the perfect first launch strike attacks. Now, we will fill the skies following the first launch with ABMs with smart technology. Now, Dr. Roberts didn't talk about the smart technology, but I know it exists on the ABMs. And the ABMs will be able to shoot down most of the incoming Russian and Chinese ICBMs. We won't be able to counter their nuclear submarines fully, but mostly. The estimates that I have read is that 50 million Russians will die in a first strike. I didn't get an estimate on the Chinese. And 8 to 12 million Americans will die in a first strike. Now, what's interesting to me is let's set Dr. Roberts' hypothesis and my supporting evidence aside, and let's take a look at what's going on in the federal government. I know for a fact that these agencies are decentralizing and engaging in redundancy of administrative activities, which is what you would do if you felt that some of your agency would be destroyed in an upcoming war. So the federal government is preparing for this. And I know in one case of one agency is that they haven't even done cost estimates for relocating operations, and this has been challenged by employees, and they said, doesn't matter, we're just going to do it anyway. In other words, there's a rush on to do this, and now we're beginning to see in the media, and I don't know if you guys have seen this, but the date of June 22nd is beginning to surface as a possible first strike against Russia, and you know where it was announced? On The Simpsons. And how many times in past TV shows have we seen things forecast like 9/11 and so forth and so on? Now, it's my operating hypothesis that we won't just launch a first strike. Obama has to get this country under martial law to control us because we're war-weary and we don't trust him. So I look for a false flag attack as a precipitating event of which we'll blame Iran, and that will draw Russia in, and then we'll have the provocation to launch a first strike. That's my operating hypothesis. Well, I just want to get your guys' reaction to this.
Well, it's almost like the point has come. The testing point for the continued existence of the human species is right on our doorstep, Dave. You know, if the British succeed in using Obama, well, to set this motion for a thermonuclear war, what's going to happen then, literally? That's hell.
Well, it's a great depopulation event.
Yeah. But Dave, my question is, why would they do such a thing when they could take us down economically and almost achieve the same type of goals, perhaps not as quickly and not as surgically, we'll say, but they could take us out economically? Why do it with missiles and bombs and bullets and that type of thing when they could take us out as we took down the very way we took down the Soviet Union with the economy?
Well, we have had sanctions against these folks, and we have bridled China with debt that they're never going to be able to recover unless they fully occupy this country. But that's a really good question. What makes sense to me, if this operating hypothesis that stems from Dr. Roberts is correct, I believe that they're looking at depopulation, because ask yourself this question: even if we can negate a retaliatory strike by Russia and China, are there really ever any winners in a nuclear war? You have nuclear winter, you'll have severe climate change, you'll have pollution of natural resources. Maybe this is why they have the seed vault. Maybe this is why they have the massive underground tunnels. Maybe this is why the transhumanism experiments are going on. This might be a transitional move for humanity, and the globalists will just go underground, do their transhumanism, and reappear at a later date. Just food for thought.
Interesting.
Well,
Sheila, I know that you and I spoke with a source in Montana about the word transformation should mean a lot to you, right? I mean, interesting timing as well. It seems like this summer, whether it be June 22nd or July 15th or sometime in the near future, it seems like something precipitous is about to take place here, or something precipitous will occur. Well,
it's always been my operating hypothesis: false flag, martial law to get the folks under control, seize the guns, and then the Third World War. And I've been very consistent in writing about this, and now I'm seeing this. Doug, I think if you double back on some of your sources, you're going to find the same thing I'm finding with redundancy of activities. And also what we're seeing, too, are groups like the State Department. They're moving away from their primary critical mission, and they're moving into UN type of activities, such as programs supposedly designed to feed and vaccinate places like Africa. And they're ramping these up and putting massive personnel into these operations. And I just find it extremely strange that the State Department would be involved in this. They're almost becoming the foreign aid entity for the U.S. government.
Yeah, I did find those particular things, and especially activities south of the equator. I couldn't, and I still can't connect some of the dots, but what you're saying via Paul Craig Roberts is rather interesting. Sheila, have you heard anything specific about this as well?
Well, I'm really starting to connect some dots. I mean, Dave, you've talked a lot about how many Russian troops are on our soil, how many thousands. And I think about Congress willfully going along with this. But, what happened to swearing an oath to protect enemies, foreign or domestic? I mean, it seems like every single thing Dave loops into. It's more examples of these treasonous shenanigans, because it really is a takeover, a total takeover of our system at every level. I thought maybe a month ago that Putin was really positioning himself to basically control much of the energy on the planet, and it seemed like he was putting a stranglehold on all of Europe. I mean, he was threatening to revive the Cuban Missile Crisis and sort of undermining. Well, Dave, you've talked about the trade agreements. He's arming, Latin American states with high-tech weaponry. I think the thing, what I think is, we've got this kind of coterminous playbook happening where Russia and China are collapsing the dollar. And Dave, I know that, again, you've covered the NFL, you've covered these camps. I mean, if you really look at it, it's all sort of, it seems like the connect the dots is really follow into place. And I think about, even Dave had Jim Garrow on the show, and they were talking about that nuke debacle. And, these two devices went missing, and I think these protocols were so incredibly violated. There was layers and layers of protections and signing off at every level in the chain of command. And, how many violations are always going on here? And it wasn't just some Johnny-come-latelys. This was two generals and an admiral saying, we've got to stop this. But then again, the lamestream, good old clown news network, nothing to see here, folks. And then there was another story that came out, nukes in the hands of terrorists could result in a bomb coming to Charleston Harbor. I mean, do you find it interesting, Dave, Doug, and Joe, that the mainstream keeps warning us now of these EMPs every other week too? You gotta sort of wonder how to connect all these dots.
Yeah, that was even in the movie Godzilla.
Godzilla, yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere now. And then you had that show Revolution that was precipitated by an EMP-like event.
EMP. Yeah.
That basically destroyed the world. So,
Well, look at the Grid-X drill, Dave. I mean, it's like you said on my show back, 2 months ago, why are we allowing Chinese and Russians to participate in our simulated infrastructure takedown drills? How does that make any sense, Doug, Joe, and Dave?
Well, I can tell you what I'm beginning to suspect, and this is only a theory, and this is just speculation, and I want to make that clear. But if you invite Chinese and Russians into the country, and they're clearly here, we have multiple evidence that they're here. We have the government admitting they're here, for God's sake. But what's interesting is maybe it's a way to get the Russians and Chinese to let their guard down. They're looking at that Obama's complicitous with them, and they're going to be here to usher in a new America that they control after the economic collapse. But instead, it could be the big double cross, to where we get China and Russia to let down their guard and we launch on them. I don't know, just like I said, I'm trying to piece all these events together, and it's causing me right now to speculate in the absence of information. But here's what I do know, that we're seeing clear signs in 4 agencies of redundancy of activities, as well as dispersion geographically of key functions within 4 different agencies. That speaks to continuity of government. Wouldn't you agree, Doug?
I do agree, and if I can interject something here, I just want to tell people, and Sheila, I think you know the source on this, March 1968, I think it was March 8th, March 6th, something like that, of 1968, a Soviet 129 submarine went missing in the Pacific near the island of Hawaii, and what was found was there was an attempted launch, a nuclear-tipped missile out of the nuclear sub, this S-129, and the actual missile blew up in the tube as opposed to striking Hawaii. Now, this is a Russian sub, folks. Think about this. March 1968, Cold War. Russia launches on Hawaii. What the intent was, it was to blame the attack on China. and have the U.S. and China fight it out, and then Russia step in and pick up the pieces. And this, of course, spawned the Glomar expedition in part. Okay. Now, having said all of that, are we seeing, Dave and Sheila and Joe and listeners, are we seeing perhaps a situation very similar to what we saw 50 years ago or 45 years ago?
So are you saying this is Auschwitz on steroids? I mean, is really what you're talking about, Doug?
This is the ultimate false flags of false flags. The chess at the highest of levels. You talk about 3-level chess. You're talking about, ultimately countries setting up other countries to enter into war under false pretenses, and using the citizenry of various countries as just merely cannon fodder for global accomplishments, global conquest.
Well, I guess the playbook here is, Dave, I think you and I would agree before. We thought, if you have Russia and China collapsing the dollar, effectively owning all our resources, our energy grid, and, setting up a nice little area for complete subjugation. But I'm not sure if this is the playbook here. What's your weigh in on that, Dave?
Well, I have two responses to this, and it goes to bolster my operating hypothesis. Number one, in the Pravda article today, they quoted the Wolfowitz document from 1992 that said, prevent the rise of a superpower, and the U.S. will do anything it can do to stop that. And they said this is clearly what the Obama administration is dedicated itself to. And this is out of a Russian publication. So I think that is really, really important to consider. Whether it's true or not, the Russians believe it's true. And I wrote an article where I said I thought by June 8th, if Putin didn't attack the Ukraine and you have a situation where NATO consolidates their forces, he'll never be able to take Ukraine. So I said the window for World War III is open during these dates until NATO's war games start in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, in this month and July. And Putin has done nothing. I think he doesn't know what to do. I think he's in a case of analysis paralysis, but it also explains why he's giving away so many of his energy resources to China. This man desperately needs allies. So he signed a $400 million deal or $1 billion deal between China and Russia, but he's also made the Chinese partners in some of Russia's natural resource holdings. And that's trying to marry the two economies. So an attack upon Russia will be a de facto attack upon China. And I think this adds, fuel to the fire. And then there's one more thing. Sheila, you had mentioned Daniel Estulin earlier, and I tracked down a story today. I heard a rumor that Daniel Estulin said that one of the stories coming out of Bilderberg Conference is the fact that they're very concerned about the alliance between Russia and China, and the Bilderberg wants to stop it. Well, I went and researched that, and I'm going to have to talk to Daniel about this because he's on my show on the 22nd. And sure enough, Daniel did say that, and this is what he's uncovered. So I think a lot of the signs right now point to the fact that nuclear conflict is imminent.
Well, you're right. China and Russia inked that new energy deal, and then they issued a blunt warning that, they were going to respond. It just kind of feels like Putin seems to want a resurgence of the former Soviet Union. But then again, around the world, we're really seeing things develop because of, the impact of these puppet masters, too. Don't you think, though, Dave, Barry Soetoro has been the most duplicit puppet of all time, really?
Well, I think Bathhouse Barry would have been a wonderful foster parent in the Virginia CPS system because that's who they like to pick. But look, if you go through the history of Barry Soetoro, his mother worked for Tim Geithner's father in the CIA-sponsored Ford Foundation, and they were very much into creating Manchurian candidates, and that's what I think good old Barry is a Manchurian candidate. He's the very man that the Soviet defectors of the 60s, 70s, and 80s warned us about. It's invasion from within. But he's owned by the bankers. He's owned totally by the bankers. And I think if there is a third world war, let me give you my greatest fear. My greatest fear is that we will defeat China and Russia decisively. at the cost of billions of lives across the planet, and that America, to some extent, would be somewhat unscathed, and this is how you'd get the military to go along with Barry, because they're not going to commit suicide. They think they can win the war. They might follow his orders. But then you look at what are the implications of nuclear war, as I pointed out earlier, such as nuclear winter. And I go back to how would the elite survive this? Well, go underground and start your transhumanism transformations that we've heard so much about.
Well, it's all unfolding
right.
like these Illuminati kingpins want it, really, isn't it, Doug Joe? And complete totalitarianism, and the sheeple will be ready for their new world order. Complete enslavement.
You know what? As you were talking, Dave, I happened to notice somebody in our chat room talk about it was Jim Arks. I think that's how you pronounce it or how it's said. Just simply made a statement, said, "Guess who's coming to dinner?" That's a 1967 movie, and those familiar with that movie, it's about a couple whose attitudes, if you will, are challenged when their daughter brings home a fiancé who's black. Folks, that movie, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, based on information that I've gotten from known and trusted sources, including those that Sheila, shall we say, was Hollywood's version, Hollywood's heads up of a longer plan that I would say involve Obama. Okay, there are a lot of references. Dave, you talk about Simpsons. We're talking about a movie that came out in 1967. Trust me when I say this, folks. That movie's worth watching in the context of where we are today politically. That's all I'll say about that.
Sidney Poitier, that was the main actor in the movie.
Yes, it was Spencer Tracy. Yeah, exactly. Sidney Poitier. Yeah, that's right. And Spencer Tracy and the other Katharine Hepburn. That one. Yes, exactly. But I think that there were, how Hollywood telegraphs things. This plan was set in motion for where we are today many, many years ago. Now, people might say, "Oh, come on," and slap me upside the head because you're talking about Hollywood, a movie, a love story, a controversial one at that, but nonetheless, I just have to say that if things occur in The Simpsons, for example, what's to say that things could not have occurred back in Hollywood back in the 60s in movies like this? But
they just occurred in Captain America. Robert Redford plays the director of this organization that he's supposed to be leading, but he's really undermining, and he justifies what he's doing by telling Captain America, he says, we want to build a better world, but sometimes to build the better world, you have to first destroy the old one. Out of chaos comes order. And this was right in Captain America.
Interesting. Wow. I got to tell you, this has been a fantastic program. Sheila, I know you're probably just I owe you, kiddo. We owe you. We owe you for this. This is fantastic. And Dave, we owe you as well. I mean, my goodness, both of you just pouring your hearts out and giving the information like none other. And I know, Sheila, you've got a show to do here in just another hour and 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, I've got to jump off, Doug, but I do want to say, Dave, we are so glad you're back. Again, we just absolutely support you. And folks, I would really like to encourage you to go to Dave's site and also donate. I mean, I cannot stress this case with Monica Wilskowski. I mean, her child. I mean, we need to start a legal fund. We need to really start ramping things up when it comes to going against these people. And I encourage you to support Dave. He's had a big financial hit. I personally will be supporting Dave financially, and as well as I encourage other people to do so, because I'll tell you what, we put our necks out on the line each and every day. And I sometimes don't wonder, I don't know if people actually realize, Dave, Doug, and Joe, how much, when you really get into the rabbit hole of all of this and you scratch and drill down into the truth, I don't think people understand the sacrifices that, we make to bring people the truth.
Oh, absolutely. And Sheila, and that goes the same for Sheila. Sheila, you deliver a fantastic product in your program. Folks, support Sheila. And Sheila, once again, the Million Man Fast starts Sunday, correct?
It starts Sunday and goes for 3 days. No, I'm personally doing, like I said, the SR 416 fast with no food, no drink except for water. And basically, when you get up Sunday morning, it starts, and we're going right till Tuesday night. And like I said, will be updates on weekendvigilante.com. If you click on the Million Man Fast, which is we're fasting and praying, I'm going to have some information on the phone-in conference prayer line, and we're going to actually do that tomorrow at 3, and that'll be all updated. And I do have to run because I have my new show debuting on TFRN. So good luck, and God bless you guys. And Dave, again, we love you. We support you. And the good news, Dave, one of the things I just wanted to say, I think it's great news that you're not the lone wolf crying in the dark now, because, everybody's jumped on board. Some very prominent media people have decided they're going to cover this. I'm certainly going to dig into the bowels of these stories, too. And we're with you, Dave, on supporting you in this big, nefarious, insidious sex trafficking ring that is just absolutely, it's heinous.
Well, I appreciate that, because it's never healthy to be the lone voice in the wilderness. I think Michael Hastings found that out, as did Breitbart, as did Tom Clancy. So, we do this at some risk to ourselves and our families, and it's good to kind of share the glory, so to speak, of revelation. I've never really looked at myself, and Doug, I know that you're very much like me in this way. I could care less who breaks a story first. If I happen to stumble upon it, great, I'll share it. But I want company in that crowded pool, because it's safer that way. It also gives more credibility to what I'm saying if other people find the same thing. So I have always welcomed that. And let me address one other thing, too, before you go. And it's only a few people that have said this, and I probably could ignore it. But some people think that when I took down my website for 2.5 days, that it was a publicity stunt. Look, I was incredibly naive. I didn't think anybody would miss me for 2.5 days. I'm not kidding. I was stunned at the reaction. I thought I could disappear for a couple days. And then some people have come forward now, and they've said that I did it as a publicity stunt to ramp up my hits on my website and the listeners on my show. Well, last Sunday I did a rerun, so that was false. And on my website, my hits are down about 10%, because when you go offline for a few days, people go somewhere else. And so that was my objective. It certainly didn't work very well.
It backfired, Dave.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, my gosh. Well, folks, everyone listening tonight, tune in to Sheila's program tonight. You're going to have a fantastic show. Sheila, plug your program, midnight Eastern, 9 Pacific. Tonight is American Freshman and W tonight, right?
You bet. Absolutely.
All
it's going to be a real hard-hitting show. God bless you guys. And again, Dave, you're back in the saddle, and come out swinging. That's what I say. You might as well be on the top of the hit list.
Well, I've got a renewed vigor, and as my friend Ernie Hancock said, if you're going to be on the list, you better be at the top of the list. So that's where I want to be.
Okay, God bless you, fellas.
God bless Sheila.
Bye, Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila. That was Sheila Zielinski, the Weekend Vigilante. What a wonderful lady. Dave, I'll tell you what, met her in Bozeman, and just fun. I mean, Joe and I just think the world of her. She really has got it together. Fantastic questions. And that's why we wanted to step out of the way and let her talk about what you folks talked about last night, and some new stuff. But tell us more about this. Well, I'll tell you what. We've got about 15 minutes left of the program. Where do you want to take this in the final?
Well, let me just say this about Sheila very quickly.
Sure.
I first met Sheila probably a little over a year and a half ago, and she had hooked up with Tim Ball, and I had Dr. Tim Ball on my show a lot with regard to the climate change, global warming fallacies, and my first thought was, well, she's working with Tim, she's credible, because Tim Ball is as good as there is out there. And they interviewed me on water and water crisis around the planet, and we shared ideas, and I came away thinking, this is a lady who really is in command of the issues. And since that time, I've got to know Sheila on a personal level, And as knowledgeable and as smooth as her delivery is, the integrity of her character and the strength of her spirit are really her best assets. And so, Doug, when you praise Sheila for being a remarkable person, I want to echo that because she truly is.
Well, I'm glad you think so, because I'll tell you something. I've never seen a woman work as hard, and I know her and I were both. It was in the lobby of the hotel room. I don't know, 1, 2 in the morning. We were talking and attempting to work out some information from sources, and we were both trying our best to stay awake, and it was just incredible. It was a marathon session, so we're working our hearts out to get the information to the public, and we have so much information now. Dave, I was looking at this case of yours, in particular, I'm afraid to even get involved in it. The one referenced on. So some of the references I made on tonight's show on HomelandSecurityUS.com, I didn't want to go too deep into certain areas because I know that things are pending litigation. Is there anything that you? Boy, I don't even know what to ask here, given the fact that this is really a minefield.
I've really said about as much as I can say at this time.
All right.
There will come a time when we clear any potential legal issues, and I feel the waters are a little more calm, that I might be a little more forthcoming with certain things. But right now, I've been told by my attorney, talk about some things, don't talk about others. And I know anyone who's been involved in litigation understands that.
Exactly.
But I'll just say this, the attacks upon my life aren't just threats. I've been threatened. Like I said, I've been shot at, run off the road. But this is the most serious thing I faced because it's now extended into knowledge of my family and whereabouts and schedules and so forth. And this is what really shook me to my core. And this is why I did the strategic withdrawal for a couple of days so I could contemplate, how I was going to respond. And the way I've responded is I've come out swinging. And I've decided that I want to be on top of the list, and I'm not going to back down. And I'm trying to encourage all my media colleagues to join me in some of these issues like child sex trafficking so I don't have to bear this burden alone. And I'm doing it partly for selfish reasons because, I don't want to be the sole target, but also because I think this issue is fundamentally important to the welfare of our country. When I said earlier, guys, that any nation that won't defend its youth does not deserve to be a nation, those weren't idle words. I truly mean that. If America won't stand up to these criminal CPS groups and to the child sex trafficking going on by some of our political leaders and corporate leaders, then what good are we?
Amen,
Absolutely
brother.
Right. And this is such a huge issue. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest issue threatening families and especially the safety of children that is never reported in the mainstream media, hardly ever talked about even in the alternative media. And it would be our honor to jump on board with you and to get into these investigations and to expose this evil for what it is and the people that are perpetrating it for who they are.
And I'll say this, Dave. I'll say this. And the final sentence in this show promo for tonight, despite the threats we are just getting started, I mean that. We will stand side by side, and we will expose the satanic, this evil, this most hideous agenda against our children and our children's children that there is. You've got this, and I think you laid the case out very well tonight. The complexity, you made it simple. You simplified it. Look, you've got CPS deeply involved. The court systems are corrupt. They're compromised. Everything is compromised at all levels. We are a captured operation at this point. We need to break free of this. We need to expose the very players involved in this, and we're not going to stop until we do, because these sick puppies must be exposed, and their crimes, their misdeeds, their this stuff, by the way, Dave, I got to tell you, Russ Dizdar at the conference, and I and Joe, we're talking. The three of us were talking about the one case in particular. There's a young girl being held in a. Oh, I don't even want to get into it, but I'll just say this: she's being kept in a dog cage in some 20, 30 miles from where I'm sitting right now, and she's been in that cage for quite some time, being used in satanic ritual, sexual abuse type things. And this has. I know Russ is attempting to find this young girl. We're talking about a young girl that's essentially a feral human being at this point, to rescue her. And Russ is deeply involved in trying to rescue her. But this is part of this. This is satanic. This is ritualistic. This is going on. This is real life, folks. This is as uncomfortable as you will ever. This is uncomfortable. But this is what Dave Hodges is talking about at its periphery. This is what I'm talking about as well. This is what Russ Dizdar is talking about. Things like this. This is just absolutely incredible.
Well, I want to invoke the memory of Solzhenitsyn, and remember, I am a non-violent person, but I will defend myself and my family. And I find it interesting, like in the case of Monica, when they came and took her kid, they SWAT teamed her. And I want to put a message out to all our brothers and sisters in law enforcement. Most of you are incredibly good and brave people, and you do things that most of us don't even have the courage to do. And for that, I love and respect you. But most of you out there have the ability to just say no. I won't participate in these CPS actions. You people want to go out, you're federal agents now, you get the FBI to go out with you. And there's not enough FBI agents to cover this. The police need to stand down. And Solzhenitsyn said this. He said, we often wondered as we were sitting in the concentration camps if we had stood up and fought back, would maybe the KGB had not done what they did, because if they didn't think they were going home to their families that night, it might have given them hesitation. And I think we need to put the same fear into these CPS agents that destroy lives. And like I said, I know I'm walking on thin ice because I'm nonviolent, but I do believe people have an inherent right to protect their children from the harm that's being perpetrated against them. And you and the police force across America, you need to stop supporting these criminal activities. Do your job as a law enforcement agent that you signed up for, which is to protect and serve. Don't protect and serve the perverted special interests in this country. Please stand down and remember your oath.
Dave, in the waning minutes here, how can our listeners, how can we best help you?
I need whistleblowers. I've got some that have come forward, but I wrote this in the article today. I can't find where Virginia CPS, let me say this, I've had CPS agents out of Virginia tell me that they can see how kids could disappear to go into trafficking, but they didn't have any firsthand knowledge. I know some people in these agencies are as shocked as the disaffected agents who've contacted me. We need whistleblowers. And really, if you're afraid for your life because you're exposing these criminal behaviors, I'll protect your identity. I'll only use your name with your permission, but I need people to come forward and name names and dates and places and so forth. And I said this in my article today. There's what you know and what you can prove. What I know from Nancy Schaefer's great work and Nick Bryant's great work is that our children are being trafficked, and CPS is one of the vehicles that makes this happen. I'm really focusing in on Virginia because I promised Monica Wesolowski that I would not abandon her the same way I haven't abandoned Stacy Lynn after 2.5 years in Fort Collins under similar circumstances. And what I need from you people out there is help in Virginia tracing the criminal elements of CPS and the Department of Family Services, and if there's any criminal activity in the Fairfax County Attorney's Office, I need to know this too. And you can contact me at Dave Hodges at thecommonsenseshow.com. We need to form an army of investigators. One person can't do this alone.
Very true, my friend. Very true. You've got us at your side. beside you, behind you, next to you, whatever. I mean, we're there for you, with you, and we ask people to do exactly what you have requested, to come forward, having this information. And look, you know, why wouldn't they? You're either complicit, or they've got to come forward.
Doug, let me use Monica's son Dylan here as an example. And Monica, if you're listening to me right now, go get a drink of water, because I don't really want you to hear this. But if the kid's being abused right now, and Monica still has some limited visitation rights, when they get into December and they're the year anniversary from December 5th and when he was taken, then the Virginia law will permit CPS to totally take Dylan away from Monica with no visitations, and she'll never see him again. What do we think will possibly happen to him? If he's already being sexually molested now, what will happen when there's no parental involvement and no chance of parental oversight? We need to act quickly to protect people like Dylan and the other children in these same kinds of circumstances. Children are being abused and being murdered under these circumstances, and we need to act quickly.
Absolutely. Did you tell me, as we close out the show here, did you tell me, Dave, that you were in contact with or had spoken with or have channels to John DeCamp, former Nebraska senator?
No, I don't. It's more of a 2 to 3 degrees of separation.
All right. Because
I'm familiar with his work from. Well, I can tell you who does though. Nick Bryant does, and I do have access to Nick Bryant.
Okay. The reason I'm asking this, I believe that the Franklin cover-up is still a cover-up, and the tentacles are reaching out from that. I mean, there's still that never went away. It just morphed into something different, something perhaps a little bit larger, based on what I've been able to uncover myself. And I think that you're right on the money, and I think you hit a nerve with the CPS. The state CPS offices, and I think that's where a lot.
Well, yeah, they told Monica that she runs the risk, basically, of not seeing her kid again because she went on my show, and I'm writing articles about this. Also, too, I'm going to be looking to help Monica set up a fund. She needs a legal defense fund. She's been using local attorneys who are part of the system, and they basically order Monica to follow the directions of the corrupt CPS. So she needs money to bring in an outside attorney who will be independent of this corrupt system in Fairfax County. And I'm undecided if I'm going to be able to put it on my website or if I'm going to go to Facebook with it. But I would ask people that once that is up and we're helping Monica raise funds, that everyone would donate generously to her cause, because she doesn't have long to turn this around.
No, it doesn't appear that way, and it seems as if I'm still. I guess my last question here, Dave, is how in the world were these two married or two men who are cohabitating? How were they selected for getting her child? I mean, how did that happen?
Well, as I kind of alluded to in the beginning, Doug, I think what happened here, and I know time is short, is because Congressman Wolf from the 10th Congressional District in Virginia is investigating child sex trafficking actively. It's a big part of his congressional website. It's the main part of it. And someone who Monica's had some incidental and social contact with was providing the congressman and other congressmen with information about child sex trafficking, and he might have been murdered, died under mysterious circumstances. When Monica had these incidental contacts, that's when the IRS came forward and audited her. That's when the drug testing started. So this is why we believe this whole thing is politically motivated. Someone thinks that Monica knows about the sex trafficking when she doesn't. And I want to say this publicly, she is not my source on this material. She knows nothing about other than what you could read publicly. But I believe she was targeted for this reason. And CPS was just a willing participant because they make money off the process.
I understand now. Okay, that makes sense. I was hung up on that one detail there. Now I understand. So essentially, it was Yeah, I get that. Okay, not a problem.
One of the things that just
go ahead.
Last comment here. Monica just texted me. She is listening, and she said she didn't find out about the 2 gay fathers until 4 weeks after her boy was there. And this is a woman who's been charged with nothing, yet they put her on a child abuse list that lasts for 18 years with no due process, I believe no rights of appeal, and she could lose her security clearance with the State Department over this, and yet she's not been charged with a crime. This is how criminal the Virginia CPS is.
And Dave, during this interview, I've been reading some of that PDF document and some of the policies and practices of the CPS, and in their documents, they state it so vague that they can manipulate any situation into some form of neglect, abuse, or to suit whatever title or label they have for it. Even they talk about how children act out in school could be.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Joe.
So
people need to read those 110 pages because it shows you what's coming to so many families. And let me mention one last thing. I'm happy to announce that Doug Hagmann is going to be a guest on my show June 15th. My show runs from 9 to 12 Central Time. You can link in through it to my website at thecommonsenseshow.com. And Doug, I forget what hours we said you're on, but just listen to the whole show because you'll catch the 2 hours that Doug Hagmann's on, and we're going to be talking about a lot of these topics and more.
Absolutely, and I'm honored to be asked, and I'm honored to come on your show, Mr. Hodges.
The pleasure's all ours.
Oh man, I'll tell you something. You're just on fire. You really are, and you know what? We want to keep you around, buddy. Seriously, when we were at the conference, I can't count the emails that I got from people wanting to make sure you're all right. So I'm glad that you're okay. We're glad you're okay. We're behind you 100%. We're going to keep you elevated in prayer, and by the protection of our Savior, and certainly by our works and practices here on the earthly realm as well. Trust us on that.
I agree. God is king, and Jesus is in control, and I appreciate that very much.
All right. We're at the end of the program, Dave. TheCommonSenseShow.com, TheCommonSenseShow.com. Dave, thanks for being our guest tonight. God bless.
My pleasure, Doug and Joe, and thanks for having me on.
All right, sir. We'll talk soon. Folks, that'll do it for tonight. Wow.
Fantastic and eye-opening interview there. And once again, thank Sheila for her input and
Sheila
help with that interview, and Mr. Hodges for spending his time. And we do have to get behind him in prayer and in any way that we can make a difference in this fight, because it is really against good versus evil. And we're talking about, we talk about abortion a lot, but this is almost just as heinous, as these victims are helpless young children that need the protection that we can put together. So we need to be on top of this as best we can.
We're going to be exposing the heck out of this, Joe, you and I, along with Mr. Dave Hodges as well. And we are going to be doing a show on the Franklin cover-up. It's just a matter of logistics with the principals there, in particular former Senator John DeCamp. With that said, just want to wish you all a good night. We're going to probably have to expand this program into maybe a 6-day program at one point.
Coach Dave, Monday night.
Right
Don't
on.
miss it. We'll see you then. God bless. Stay safe. Have a great weekend.
Good night.